All right, good evening. Thank you for your patience. I would like to call the special meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Would the Deputy City Clerk, Megan Wilbanks, please call roll?
Commissioner Cooley?
Here.
Commissioner Francis? Here. Commissioner Houghton? Here. Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioner Munoz Morris?
Here.
Vice Chair Hopkins?
Here.
Chair Khan?
Here. At this time, we will hear any public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled at a future meeting. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comment requests?
Chair, before we jump into public comment, could we go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that reminder. Do we have any public comments, requests?
All right, we've received a number of requests. I am not seeing anything for items that aren't on the agenda. If anyone in the audience did wish to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda, please just fill out one of these forms or raise your hand so that we can allow you your time to speak. Okay, Chair, seeing none.
The next item is the consideration of the minutes of the October 26th Planning Commission minutes. Do we have a motion? Excuse me, does anybody have any comments on the agenda, on the minutes? If not, do I have a motion and a second to approve the consent?
Motion. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Seeing none, motion passes. On to the public hearings. Any court challenge to an action taken on a public hearing item on this agenda will be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And also, if you could fill out one of these speaker slips right there, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So the first item is 4A is 1422 Monterey Street. It is a review of a new 86,180 square foot 5-story mixed-use project consisting of 106 affordable residential units, 4,306 square feet of commercial space, and a 3-story parking garage.
And Chair Khan, I'll be recusing myself from this item as my employer has an existing business relationship with the architect. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask any planning commissioner for their ex parte disclosures of contact with anyone who had provided information to planning commissioner not on the record, so the information may be used as part of this decision-making process. Anybody? Nope. Okay. Would Housing Coordinator Kyle Bell please present the report?
Thank you for that introduction. As said, my name is Kyle Bell, the Housing Coordinator for the Community Development Department. Tonight we will be reviewing the proposed affordable housing mixed-use development located at 1422 Monterey. Tonight's recommendation is to find the project consistent with the general plan, community design guidelines, and zoning regulations, and approve the project subject to findings and conditions as outlined in the staff resolution. The project spans the block of Monterey Street between Pepper and California intersections. Direct access to the site is provided along Monterey Street and Palm Street. The site is located in the commercial retail zone, as well as the medium density residential zone along the Palm Street frontage. The site is surrounded by commercial uses to the south and east and low density residential homes to the north. The site shares a border with the Union Pacific Railroad along the west property line, and there is a small open creek channel that daylights the project site between two existing culverts for a span of 35 feet. On October 10th, the tree committee reviewed the proposed tree removals and conservatory planting plan and recommended 3 conditions for consistency with the city's tree removal ordinance. The conditions have been incorporated into the draft resolution that was provided in the packet. On October 17th, the ARC provided 2 recommendations to modify the project design for consistency with the community design guidelines to be reviewed prior to final action. The applicant has modified the project plans to incorporate the recommendations by the ARC for the Planning Commission's consideration. The project includes the demolition of the existing commercial structures on the property, and the project provides a 3-story parking garage that is located toward the center of the property and includes 3 points of access. First, access to the ground level will be provided through the Monterey Street frontage. Access to the second level will be provided through the first driveway along Palm Street, and access to the third and top level will be provided through the second driveway along Palm Street. There are 2 triplexes that will be provided along Palm Street frontage. Both triplexes are limited to 2 stories in height. The 2 mixed-use structures are located along Monterey Street. Both structures are 5 stories in height and have been designed into the natural slope of the property. The project provides 2 public plazas that face Monterey Street to effectively break up the mass of the structures along the street frontage while providing a public amenity and outdoor areas for residents and visitors. The project consists of 106 residential units that are 100% of the units will be dedicated as affordable housing for low-income households. 56 of the units will also be dedicated for senior housing. The California Department of Housing and Community Development has established a regional housing needs allocation plan for each jurisdiction throughout the state. The city of San Luis Obispo is required to provide the construction of 1,735 new residences based on various income levels by 2028. San Luis Obispo has already exceeded the number of units required for above moderate incomes, also referred to as market rate housing. The proposed project would contribute more than 25% of the remaining units that are needed for the low-income households under the plan. The California Housing Accountability Act states that the city shall not disapprove a housing development project for affordable housing or condition approval in a manner that renders the housing development project infeasible. Furthermore, in accordance with density bonus law, projects that provide 100% affordable housing for low-income households are entitled to 3 incentives or concessions that result in removing barriers to developing the project with the requested density bonus. The Density Bonus and Housing Accountability Act work in concert with one another and mandate that the city shall not deny the density bonus or concessions unless the agency can make one of the required findings that are presented on the screen based on substantial evidence that the density units, the concessions, or waivers would result in a specific adverse impact. The first concession that is requested by the applicant is to increase the maximum height of the property from 45 feet to 54 feet to accommodate an additional floor for the affordable units resulting from the density bonus. The project has been designed to minimize any potential impacts to the adjacent residential neighborhood by designing the project into the slope of the property and orienting the height and mass and scale of the project towards the center of the property with upper story stepbacks along the street frontage. The second concession is requested to reduce the required parking from 100 spaces to 95 spaces. This concession is requested to reduce the cost of the project that would be imposed by full compliance of the standard that would likely require the expansion of the parking garage. In accordance with the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the peak parking demand for all uses on site will not coincide in that would result in an anticipated maximum demand of 79 spaces. The total amount of parking spaces on site will exceed the peak parking demand in accordance with the Institute of Transportation Engineers. The third concession is requested to reduce the bicycle parking requirement for the 56 senior housing units to be consistent with the vehicle parking requirement of 0.5 spaces per bedroom, rather than 1 space per unit. This concession has been requested to reduce costs associated with the bicycle parking storage and to prioritize space within the project for residential amenities. In addition to the affordable housing incentives, the density bonus law mandates that the city cannot impose any development standard that would have the effect of physically precluding the construction of the project at the density requested. The project has requested 3 waivers from development standards to accommodate the project at the density bonus requested. The first waiver is requested to reduce the setback requirement along the CR zone where it transitions to the low density residential zone to provide a 3-foot setback where 10 feet would normally be required. This waiver is requested to accommodate the 3-story parking garage to comply with the vehicle maneuverability requirements. As you can see, the parking garage is stepped into the slope of the property, and so only a portion of the parking structure would exceed the setback requirement. The second waiver is requested to allow Building 2 to be, I'm going to have to go backwards on this. There we go. The second waiver is requested to allow Building 2 to be located within the creek setback area with a distance of 6 feet from the top of the bank, where 20 feet is normally required, and an additional 10-foot step back for the structures that exceed 3 stories. This portion of the project is already developed as a parking lot, and the proposed project would not encroach into the creek setback any further than the existing site conditions. The stated purpose of this waiver is to allow for the physical construction of the additional density associated with the density bonus request. A biological resource report was provided and concluded that the improvements to the project site within the creek setback area would not impact any of the native biological resources, and that there are no suitable habitat for any special status species on or near the project site. The third waiver is from the front yard parking standards for the unenclosed parking spaces to provide a 7-foot setback where 20 feet is normally required. This waiver is requested to provide the required ADA parking stalls for the proposed triplexes within the R2 zoning district. California Building Code requires affordable housing structures that provide ground floor units to provide ADA accessible units. The ground floor units within the triplexes are provided as ADA compliant, and the parking stalls within the front yards are required per the American Disabilities Act for parking for these 2 units. And that actually concludes the staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of staff by the commissioners?
Thanks, Kyle. My question is about senior and affordable units, and are the senior units a subset of the affordable units, and do those tag both bases effectively?
Yes, the senior housing units will be also dedicated for low-income households.
Okay.
Can I keep going? Okay. There's going to be some question, I think, about the exact top of the building with respect to the 54-foot height and natural grade. Maybe we'll get into that later. Is it the top of the elevator shaft? Is it the top of the mechanical spaces?
It's measured to the top of the parapet. The elevator shafts are allowed to exceed the maximum height requirement by 10 feet per the city's code.
If they're set back a certain distance, is that how that works? Or wherever they are?
Yeah, just elevators, towers, and stair towers are allowed to exceed up to a maximum of 10 feet beyond the maximum height. So let me pull back up the elevation of the site. So the maximum 54 feet would be measured from the top of the parapet, and so the elevator towers would exceed the 54 feet.
Top of parapet, is that the dashed line horizontal, the highest one? Or is it the red dashed line?
Yes, the tallest horizontal line.
54 is the black dash line and the 45 is the red dash? Is that what we're seeing there?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then I went and walked the site and I had a hard time finding a creek. Could you explain where the creek is?
So did I.
Yes, no problem. So there is, like I said earlier, the creek only spans about 35 feet along the project site, and it daylights between two existing culverts. And so if you follow my mouse on the screen, you can see one of the culverts ends right here under an existing parking lot, and it opens up to a small little span on the site, and then it goes right back into another culvert that continues on towards Monterey Street. And so this is the only area of the creek that is exposed to daylight.
Very good. Question?
Yeah. First of all, Kyle, I want to start by thanking you and Megan for providing additional documents. I was asking for some visuals on the zoning in the area earlier, and I appreciate the staff sharing that with me. It was very informative. A couple of questions for you. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of discussion, and I want to get to public comments because I'm sure there are plenty of them. 3 access points to the parking structure. Is that because each level is not connected internally, or why do we have 3 different access points?
That is correct. So there's no internal connection between all 3 levels. This was designed by the applicant to preserve space on the site to have as skinny of a parking structure as possible, while also providing for accurate maneuverability for all 3 levels. And so the applicant probably can touch more on their intent with that design, but each level would be accessed from a different point.
Gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense to me. Basically, making best use of the space available, not sacrificing spots through ramps and connections. Okay, got it. The other question, and I know there were several comments that were received around this, is if I remember correctly, there are a total of 54 trees on the site currently that are planned to be removed. And I know you mentioned that the tree committee made some recommendations, but could you maybe speak to us how many trees are proposed to be added? And I'm not going to get into the debate of maturity versus young trees. I understand that there is a difference there, but what is the net gain or loss of trees?
Yes, the applicants have proposed a 1-to-1 ratio. The tree committee did require the preservation of trees 14 and 34. So the actual tree removal will be 52 trees. And so the replanting plan includes 52 new trees, and so it will be actually exceeding the minimum compensatory planting requirement, which is a 1-to-1.
Okay, excellent. And is there any, I guess not requirement, but any guidelines as to the maturity of the trees being brought in?
Under the city's municipal code, there is no specific requirements, but the tree committee did provide feedback about the maturity of the trees and requested that 50% of the trees that are replanted are of a minimum box size of 36 inches, and that the other 50% of the trees will be a 24-inch box. Typically, with new development, the municipal code allows for a 15-gallon tree, and so these both standards would be exceeding the minimum expectation under municipal code.
Okay.
And furthermore, the tree committee did also add a provision that requires the maximum height of the trees at planting to be larger than 10 feet. So that would be 25% of all the trees planted would be required to be planted with a minimum height of 10 feet.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then lastly, to not take up too much time, I had a quick question on bicycle parking, particularly for the senior units. We did receive a letter stating that, as a senior resident of the area, an electric tricycle is more appropriate perhaps for some more limited mobility residents. What kind of accommodations are there for those kinds of bicycles in the bicycle storage and parking areas here?
Yes, I believe in accordance with the active transportation plan, and I believe we have a condition in the resolution. I don't have the number memorized, but there's a provision that requires, I believe, 10% of the interior bicycle parking to accommodate cargo bikes or larger bikes, as well as including electric charging stations for bicycles as well.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Francis?
Yes, thank you so much. That was a really informative presentation. I had a question about the California-Monterey intersection, and it's noted in there that there's going to be a crash analysis done, and the developer will pay fair share whatever modifications are deemed necessary. And I was wondering if we have an idea of the timeline on when that crash analysis would happen, and then the subsequent modifications then would happen.
Yes, I believe the intersection improvements are further along than this project is currently, given that there still has to go through construction documents, construction review, as well as financing requirements. I don't believe we have Luke here tonight, do we? So our transportation manager is the one that's coordinating that effort, and so he is already leading that effort along. So I could maybe text him and get some greater feedback if we need to.
Any other questions of staff? With that, we'll ask, does the applicant have a presentation? Thank you. You have 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Oh, thank you. I will be brief and turn it over to our design team. My name's Scott Smith. I'm the Executive Director of HASLO, Housing Authority of San Luis Obispo. Just wanted to let you know we're excited to be here tonight. We see this project as really fitting in with a number of the city's goals and as well as values. And one of the values that comes to my mind is this diversity, equity, and inclusion goal or value that the city has formally adopted. There have been a lot of really neat things built and developed downtown, but not a lot for people of the sort of workforce housing, poor people, poor seniors. So this is going to be a really neat thing from our perspective to have something like this in the greater downtown area. We serve about 3,000 households every single day with affordable housing throughout the county, and but what most people don't realize, I want to let you know that that's across multiple programs. Every single program has a long waiting list. So we get lots of calls of people that are literally, it's housing an emotional thing, literally in tears because they're in a tough situation. And the best we can tell them is maybe we can put you on a list because some of the lists are closed because they're just too long. So that's our world that we're working in. We are asking for a 65% density bonus. I wanted to let you know that normally that would require 28% of the units to be affordable. We're proposing, and in this case, that would be 13 of the units affordable. We're actually providing 100% of the units, 105 units as affordable. One of the units, the 106th one, I guess, is an exempt unit for a resident manager. And finally, on that density bonus, we're allowed under the law to request up to an 80% density bonus, so we are not doing that. We've been before the Tree Committee and the Architectural Review Commission, as you've heard, tried to incorporate their recommendations as best as possible, and we believe that what we have before you tonight is approvable and to some extent by right under the city's mixed-use zoning ordinances and objective design guidelines, et cetera, based on what we've come in with. So with that, I'll turn it over to our design team, and thank you for your consideration.
Hello, my name is David Gibbs. I work for RM Design Group, and I'm one of the architects on this job, and happy to present this all to you tonight. Kyle, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, and it was really good to see all the different questions that you guys had. It's a large, complex project. I will do my best to stay under 10 minutes. So if there's any more questions, I would love to jump into that discussion and conversation with you. I welcome it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and, this is a little bit of agenda of what I'm talking about. We're going to go into the context, history, and a little bit of the land use element for Upper Monterey Special Focus Area. I'm going to look at the existing site, tell you guys a little bit of the story of why the design happened the way that it did, and then go into our design concept. We have a video about 50 seconds to a minute long that shows you how it would feel on Monterey Street. And then we have some responses to ARC as well, so it can really highlight how we responded to them. As you can see in this picture, this is Upper Monterey Street. It was a car-dominated world, and you know, it's really been great to see our land use element respond. How do we make this a vibrant, compact, mixed-use community? That's one of their goals. And so they came in, and you'll see that it's already transforming, right? There's not so many car dealerships. They're being transformed into mixed-use projects, and we're excited that our project will fit right into that. This area is called the Upper Monterey Special Focus Area within the land use element. there's a couple items that I've highlighted that we believe this project specifically fits in. So when we looked at this, we said, as Scott Smith alluded to, we really wanted a project that fit well within the city's goals while also fit well within respecting our neighbor. So when we went through all these different items and went to the design team as we sketched around, we said, man, 65% density bonus is really appropriate here. Going any bigger would really start to take away some of the goals that we could accomplish in the site design, which I'll go ahead and show you. But you'll see here they're asking for Upper Monterey to include outdoor dining opportunities, public activities oriented towards Monterey Street, really activating Monterey Street. They're looking for bicycle and pedestrian connectivity from downtown to Cal Poly. Here, really, this Upper Monterey really becomes this bridge for pedestrians and cyclists. So how can our project help really be a beacon to what Upper Monterey Street can become? I'm going to go ahead and, there's a lot more there, but I want to go ahead and jump into our site design because of time. So this is the existing site plan. I think Kyle Bell did a really good job kind of explaining it. I just want to emphasize that there's a 22-foot topographic difference between kind of the back of that, where that commercial parcel 1 is in the middle of the site towards Monterey Street. How could we use that to our advantage to be able to create a buffer for our R2 neighbors in the back while still creating a good building that has step backs from the street on Monterey? When we looked at this, the existing site has 6 vehicle entrance as it currently stands. We thought using 3 of those would be appropriate and take away 3 other ones to really, again, keep that sidewalk pedestrian oriented and safe for cyclists as they're moving along California and moving along Monterey Street. In the middle there, you can see some of the density of those trees that people are talking about. That's where the heart of a lot of those trees are that we're removing. They're sitting right next to some of the existing buildings. They're sitting in a really tough, steep site that's moving 22 feet up. In order to be able to build a project that responds to Monterey and responds to our neighbors, there really wasn't a feasible opportunity for us to save them. So regrettably, we just turned to the tree committee going, we want to do 1-to-1 ratio. We want to put big trees in. So just wanted to hit on that as to why that didn't become an emphasis for us working around them. So here we are. Kyle did a really good job talking about the parking structure. I think we went over that pretty well. But what I want to talk about is we dedicated 12 feet of our right-of-way, our property to the right-of-way to bring in a new Class 1 bicycle path. This is a protected bicycle path with a tree median. By providing this tree median, we're also able to save the large existing ficus that's on the street right there. And we're also going to go ahead and provide a new bus stop for the city. The project is actually adjacent to 9 bus stops. I believe this is the 10th one. Kyle could correct me if it's 8 and this is 9th. Okay, cool. This is the 10th one. This is really important, very important for affordable housing to be able to have access to bus circulation. And we're really thankful to provide this bus stop for the city and for this project. You can see right away on Upper Monterey Street, we're responding to the special focus area. We've got retail commercial, then a public plaza, then retail commercial, then a public plaza, and then a restaurant, literally fitting in exactly what the Upper Monterey is looking for. So how do we do with our neighbors? Well, first of all, when you have a project of this size, you want to park it. There's a lot of comments in the letters about, Palm Street being overrun with parking. So we said, we really want to park this project. When we went to ARC, we had a 100% parked project, but they had really good comments that actually pushed us into a 95% parked project. And I think their comments were valid. We'll go through those. But you can see here, by putting the parking structure in the rear of the site, it does one thing in plan and 2 things when you look at the topography of the site. But the first thing it does is to have an Upper Monterey Street based on its special focus area. It does not say put a parking structure on Monterey Street. That would not be appropriate for pedestrian connectivity for a vibrant community. So we knew right away our parking needs to be in the back of our site. Secondly, it gives us a great opportunity to provide a 65-foot setback from our neighbors. The ground floor only requires 10. We're 6 times bigger than that. Upper floors only requires 25 when you get to that 3rd floor. This is an R2 transition zone to CR. We were trying to make sure we fit in with all the community design guidelines that provide some really good thought that the city has put into those. So we said, let's make it 3 times bigger, put our parking back there, and you can see right away when you look at the site, the way it responds to the topography, this parking structure disappears both from Monterey and creates a very small building for our Palm Street neighbors. Where existing office, I went ahead and highlighted that in orange, is a 2.5 story building that's currently sitting there. So as you're a pedestrian, when you're looking at that building that's 10 feet from the setback, now you have a 5-story building that's 65 feet from the setback. And so just scientifically, when you talk about that line of sight, our building only looks, as you can imagine from that red line that's going across the screen, just a few feet bigger. It's very important for us that we didn't double load our corridor for this project because we didn't want any units looking down onto our adjacent R2 neighbors. All of our units face Monterey Street, and we've got a circulation path that is open circulation path. We actually adjusted this with ARC so that it's an open corridor so that the neighbors will know right away visually that someone is walking in that corridor. Previously, we had some windows, which actually it doesn't provide the transparency of someone being there. So if you're in your backyard, now you know whether someone's going to be back there or not. It also broke up our mass and provided some shadow articulation. Okay, I have some other comments about the street and how we looked at urbanism, and we looked at all these different studies, and we looked at their proper proportions. How do we step this back? And so you'll see that our 4th floor and our 5th floor all bring setbacks all along Monterey Street, and again now on California based on the ARC's recommendation. So we're wrapping our building with setbacks. I'm going to go ahead and switch to our video now. Kyle, do you have power to do that? I can keep talking about Monterey Street. We wanted to make a little video to show us all what it would feel like. You need this? Yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I don't need the mouse. You keep it. Perfect. I've got 1 minute and 35 seconds. The video is 1 minute, and then I could go over some ARC modifications. I know Kyle presented those well, but we'd be wrapping right up. So this shows you how we're dealing with the topography and providing 2 public plazas right along Monterey Street. That's the first one. You can see the bus stop there. That's our family project. The 5 stories is pushed 65 feet away from Monterey Street. Essentially, we have 40% to 50% of our building at the street, and the rest is pushed back for pedestrian activity. You can see the bicycle class 1 path coming through for people to be protected from the ongoing traffic, and you've got all the big ficus tree to the left there being saved. This is the senior building that has the restaurant on the bottom, all for the public use to be able to enjoy eating out there in Monterey. Fits in with the special focus area. Can see just the vibrancy that we expect of having retail along the street, and then again a portion for our family area to have a playground. That's a requirement from CTAC that we provide that, and again a little portion also dedicated to the public. We believe this whole site comes together to really provide a vibrant building along Monterey Street. Kyle, I think you can go back to the presentation at this time, so that I can finish up without going too long. Okay. So, what did ARC had to say? You can see on the right, this was California, and why we provided all the setbacks that we needed along Monterey, those 4th and 5th stories. You can see we had a moment where 5 stories was fully along California. They said, no, wrap the building, take that 5-story setback all the way around. So you can see on the left, we reduced our massing. We have 9-foot setback on both sides of that corner. In order to do that, we didn't want to lose any units, as this was very important that we provided the 106 affordable units here. So we took those 2 units and we put them under our what used to be duplexes with tuck under parking. ARC asked that we reduce our parking because they were thinking about traffic on Palm Street, and so we reduced 11 parking spaces and instead put those studio units underneath, so now we have these triplexes. That's where that waiver comes in, as Kyle covered well, for an accessible space, now that we have a unit on the ground floor, where before we only had units on the 2nd floors. Okay, and then the other item I already covered. You can see on the right, that was our proposed project. An ARC said, hey, this looks a little bit flat. The neighbors deserve a little bit more articulation. And these windows, even though they're only for corridors, they don't provide that transparency that the neighbors deserve. So when you provide an open corridor, like I said, now you know when someone is out there. We're providing solid doors to those units. There is no unit affordable housing looking down on our neighbors. We believe that was really important to respect our neighbors. I'm going to go ahead and finish because otherwise I'm going to go going too long. But our main goals here, I hope we're clear. We're trying to fit in the Upper Monterey Special Focus Area. We're providing deed-restricted, 100% affordable housing, and we're doing this in a manner on a tough site with a lot of topography while doing our best to respect our neighbors, we think, in the most appropriate way. I welcome any questions. Thank you.
I have a question from Commissioner Jorgensen.
Maybe 3 or 4 if I can get away
That's
with it.
fine. Yeah, no problem.
Could I start with, go back to the parking structure for just a minute?
Absolutely.
I couldn't see any turnaround spaces. Am I just missing something? It looked like every space was numbered as part of the 27 to 31 spaces you had on each floor. Is there turnaround space? If, say, the lot is, that particular access is full,
So
level 1,
it
2, or
is,
3?
it is a dead-end corridor for the parking. There is a 3-foot buffer so it allows that parking space that is there to be able to turn around. I will say this, Haslo has the 3rd floor and the 2nd floor dedicated to the residential. The bottom floor is where the commercial retail would go. So the 2 floors on the top are going to be designated parking. I believe you put one per unit and designated, so your spot is designated for yourself. So that would bring us just down to the ground floor for your concerns. Your concern is valid, but it would only be happening on the ground floor.
I guess we'll see how it plays out then. Thank you. You've got a restaurant in Building 2, at least that's the plan. How are you going to, what kind of hood vents are you going to have, and where are they going to be? I don't see anything on the roof, for instance, above that.
Sure. Given that it's a 5-story building, you wouldn't want to be taking that all the way up. You'd want to do an exterior exit. So over on California, we've got, if you can see, we've got a 12-foot alley back there for trash to be able to be accessed. So we would likely be looking to bring those hood vents to the side there to accommodate and be used on that 12-foot alley.
I see. Something like that's going to be really important, as we've seen in the mix down the street, that the ventilation systems were driving the tenants nuts
Oh,
where
yeah.
they were up near the roof.
Sure, sure.
There's a condition 28 that says, among other things, that you're going to exhaust reasonable efforts to underground utilities. But your bird's eye views sometimes have utilities running across the street and across your property. Some seem to, some don't. Where are you on this aspect of trying to underground?
So I would say on a couple of those perspectives, it's hard to get an idea of how big a building is. So since there's existing utility lines there, it kind of helps us all visualize what those are. So I leave them there, even though they're not as aesthetically pleasing for the picture. Also, it's hard to Photoshop all of it out. So it's nice to show the building. As far as how we underground, I believe we're working with the city on where they would think that would be appropriate to do so. I'm not exactly sure exactly which ones would go through. I don't know if Michael Burke has something that he wants to touch on, but I believe we're working with the city on those. I don't know if that fully answers your question, though.
So should we expect undergrounding? I'm not sure quite
Oh,
what you're...
yes.
Is that it? Commissioner Francis?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I had a question about the reduction that was requested in the bicycle parking. I understand that it was due to a lot of the housing being for seniors and potentially them needing less space for bicycles, but I know that there's also a reduction with the parking. And so I'm feeling like folks who would potentially be residents here are being crunched from both sides as far as their options for mobility. And Commissioner Munoz-Morris had asked earlier about kind of space and the potential need for larger bicycles and e-bikes especially for mobility and accessibility. And I'm a little bit nervous looking at these reductions that there's just not going to be space, especially since the units are quite small and then indoor storage of those bicycles becomes really unwieldy. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a great question. So the first thing that I would say is because this is an affordable senior housing, when we were working with staff originally on this, the state requires, half a space per vehicle. When we looked at that, we felt that it was appropriate to match vehicles and bicycles, mostly because the senior housing for the affordable aspect that we're looking at, Haslo has found that doesn't necessarily all units will be able to be using a bicycle. Providing an elevator in this project, there's just a lot of different conditions that could require that. So we went in and said, we're comfortable matching the state at half, and we think that would be appropriate for an affordable housing for the site for the bicycles. Those rooms get really large. We were providing a large room where we want to be able to lock it and secure it. If Haslo got into a position to where we really felt like a lot of their tenants had bicycle parking, there are some opportunities to maybe put some outside to be able to add some more, but to be able to put them inside, which a lot of the long-term require, it would end up making us lose a unit. And we really felt like having another family to be able to have a unit and a home here. And we just, working with Haslo, they were comfortable with being able to accommodate half a cycle space per unit to match the vehicle space requirements for state.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
Commissioner Munoz Morris? Oh, no, Houghton, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
All right, thanks for all that. A few questions. Is there a provision for budgeting for maintenance and landscaping, and what's the plan for that, for making sure everything continues to look nice down the line?
Haslo, whenever I go to their projects, they always look beautiful. I don't know if you've gone around and taken a look at them. They do a really good job maintaining their projects. Their landscape always looks fantastic. I would just lean in on their history of they know how to manage their stuff, and they're planning on doing that here.
Okay, thanks. I had a similar question that Commissioner Francis did about the bike spots. So there just isn't room to go to the full 113 on that, and 10% were for cargo, because we're seeing more and more of these oversized bikes, especially for young families, and but we're maxed out on space for the bikes.
As it's currently designed, yeah, we've maxed everything that we can. There is, there is some commercial space that, we'd have to reduce if we wanted to not lose some units. But the senior project, the restaurant, is only, if you look here, there's actually two different slabs. I don't want to get too technical here, but there's a culvert, right? You alluded it to yourself, where is this creek? And you've got an open culvert. So you actually have two different slabs. You have the restaurant on one finished floor on the right there for building 2. And if you see that dash line, you've got another finished floor on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's where all our units are, on the ground floor for the senior project. So there's not really a lot of movement that we could do there, since the restaurant is, we're comfortable with the size that it is. If we got any smaller, it would kind of sacrifice its function. So we're just running into some tight spots on this site.
So is all the bike parking provided, is it all indoors?
Yes, we have a couple spaces outside for guests arriving to the restaurant or the retail, but for the residents, we made them all long-term and lockable doors.
Okay, and outside, there's a couple?
Yeah.
Two?
No, I think we have more than that. I'd have to go back and look, but you can see by building 1, there's 4 or 5 right there in front of building 1, and then there's a few
Okay.
more in front of building 2.
Okay, seems like there's gonna be room to provide more than 2, hopefully, for that.
There could be.
I'm curious a little bit about the evolution of this design. How long's the design process been going on up to this point? I imagine it's been quite a lot of work. And was there ever any discussion, I'm not advocating for this, but did you
Sure.
start out with partial market rate, partial affordable, and then did you get to this through, what kind of a process did you use to get to 100%?
That's a great question. We've been working on this project with Haslo. I believe we started in January. Michael Burke's face tells me we started earlier, but I believe we started in January on this. And because Haslo is our client on this project, they will always be building 100% affordable projects. That is the nature of what they do. I don't know if Haslo wants to have any other question to answer to that.
I mean, I don't think we have had conversations about sort of some mixed. I'm sorry. We definitely discussed in-house wanting to, our objective, trying to make this a little bit of a mixed income project, but then we had to look at how all the financing works in the affordable housing world, and it's always been a challenge to make that work, but there's some new programs that are out now, and they're defining mixed income as your typical rental affordable project will only go up to 60% of area median income. We're looking at a relatively new program that will allow us to go up to 80% of median income, which is a pretty good jump, but still captures a little bit more of that middle that we keep hearing is the missing middle. So it is an objective to try to raise that a little bit for us, because we do see a lot of people left out of the affordable market even. But we run into some financing challenges as well. And, a lot of these financing programs are in deep silos, and it's hard to, it's not that easy to do these mixed projects. So,
Okay, thanks.
sure. Sorry for taking up so much time.
That's okay.
And just to fully answer your question too, it was, as you can see even on the site plan, there's 5 or 6 different finish floors. It's a very complicated, complex site. So when we did it, we probably had 10 or 12 different variations of what could be the best. And so we believe we've brought forth the best that we can do.
Okay. When I read through the package here, then we're talking about the 65% increase of the density allowance from 45.12 density units to 74.5 density units. But we have 105, 106, including the extra one. So help me with the math on that. How do we get to 105 from 74.5?
I can answer that if the commission would like. The city of San Luis Obispo is a bit unique in how we calculate density. A density unit does not translate to a residential unit. A density unit is an allocation of the potential build out of the site. So for instance, the city calculates a studio unit as half a density unit. So if you were allowed to have one density unit, you could have 2 studios. And so the math works out like that in that a 1-bedroom that's larger than 600 square feet is 0.66, and then a 2-bedroom unit would be 1 density unit. A 3-bedroom would be 1.5, and a 4-bedroom would be 2.0.
Aha. So a density unit is sort of the coin of your realm, and smaller is less. Okay, I think I get it now. Thank you. David, when you talked about visibility issues and the 65-foot setback and the corridor, you seem to be almost exclusively referring to building 1.
Correct.
Building 2 is also right there with windows that look down on some of those same backyards on Palm.
So, correct. So building 2, we actually are meeting what is the transition zone, and our studio units located, if they had any opportunity to have a window that is aligned with other neighboring window, it would have to be offset. We actually take our studio units and we're facing them out towards California, and then we have one studio unit that is facing towards the parking structure that I believe has a window that faces towards the neighbor, but it does not align with any neighbor's windows. And there's actually it's kind of almost like I think like a shed that's sitting right on the edge of that property that has a solid blank wall. And we thought that was appropriate that the neighbors are built right up to their property line. There's no yard that it's looking down on into or anything of that nature. The transition zone code is specifically looking at existing and how we relate to existing neighbors. And so that was one spot where we thought was appropriate.
Okay. Another question about height. It's relative to natural grade, is that right?
That is correct.
And so do you mark the natural grade where the slope is now? And so it's 54 feet from the high side on the high side and from the low side on the low side? Is that how that works?
So yeah, so it's an average natural calculation, right? So we would take the high point of the site, the low point of the site, we divide it and average it. I believe our calculations, Kyle, would be on the elevations if you wanted to take a look at them, the next.
Okay, it's that lower dashed line in that view there. Well, the one right before.
If I could just clarify here, so the average natural grade is measured from the highest and lowest point in the center. So if we take this red dashed line here as an example, so the midpoint of this line would be the point of which we would measure the maximum height. And so for this project, the maximum height is measured from the average natural grade to the parapet.
Okay.
So if you look on sheet A13 in the entitlement package, you can find that whole calculation.
Okay. I have a short question about what I might call architect speak. You said we wanted to park this project. Does that mean, what does that mean?
Oh, sorry. Vehicle spaces, we wanted to make sure that we could actually provide the parking that was necessary for this project. Haslo has been managing projects for quite a long time, and they've been using the one space per unit ratio. And when we look at this, and we look at the commercial that is needed as well, we wanted to make sure that we came in and provided the parking per the city's standards. When you look at a mixed-use project, a lot of times you'll see that 20% shared parking reduction. We didn't want to implement that. We wanted to come in with a 100% parked project, which we did with ARC. They did ask us to make a few changes that caused us to do a 5% reduction from parking. But one of our main goals when we were laying out this site is to provide a parked project as far as vehicles go, if that makes more sense.
Okay, thanks. And then this might be a question for Scott, but do you have confidence in these ratios that the kinds of units you have, the number of cars that are going to be associated with that you actually will be able to park this project?
Well, I could say that we meet city ordinances, and we do parking surveys of our existing housing, and the future is always hard to predict. I think that we have confidence because we have to manage it, and so we would not go in to something that we would have concerns about being unmanageable. From our perspective, it's a problem for management if there isn't enough parking. And so it typically is one car per on our senior projects, it's much less than one car per unit, definitely. Our families, probably about a year ago, we did a survey at 3 different times of day over the course of 4 or 5 days. We did like 6:30 in the morning before people would leave to work, and then we did afternoon, and then we did around 6:30 in the evening, and it was about, we did an actual count of utilization, and it was about one space per
One space
unit.
per unit or per bedroom or per what?
Actually, that's a good question. It was one space per unit in the survey that we did. We didn't break it down by unit types, but most of those, the projects surveyed were family developments,
Yeah.
not seniors. So, which in our world would have meant that half of those units in those projects were 2 and 3 bedroom units. That's the financing drives that unit mix
Okay.
requirement. So they were units with kids, and
Yeah.
we didn't break it down to say were those one parent households or single parent households, et cetera. But that is the way it worked out. So we felt comfortable based on, so we felt comfortable with that standard because it's been working for us.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to drill into that a little bit because a lot of the public comments were concerns about parking and parking on Palm Street and so on. And I'm not asking you to predict the future. I was just basing on the present and your past experience. So thanks for that. Last question. What do we know about energy, utilities, electric? Is it all electric? Solar, storage ready, solar ready? What do we know about any of that?
Sure. So the project is 100% electric. There's, I think, a mixed fuel would only be optioned for the commercial spaces, but the units are all 100% electric. We've done our solar calculations, and we have a flat roof, and our roof plan shows all our different solar panels being provided that meet the requirements for solar per unit for a building of this size. And we're going to be using heat pumps and things of that nature to provide, electric heating for water and all those elements. I think there was one more part to your question.
Storage, batteries?
Storage for batteries? Yeah, we haven't built that into this project, but given the new code that's coming on, we're probably going to have to do that. We went ahead and set aside larger mechanical rooms, planning on, that code having to be accounted for.
Okay. Yeah, that is coming for sure. And are the utilities common? Does everybody have their own meter? Do they have their own PG&E account, or is it per square foot? How does that work?
Hazo manages that. I believe all the utilities are included.
So it's a gross lease?
I don't know how this property is metered. Typically, if we can meter everything to the tenant, we do that. Sometimes it's not possible, but so the way it works is if there's, say, on electric, and if that's directly metered, they have their own account with the electric company. They set it up. They pay their electric bill. If it's something that's not metered, then we have to pick it up, but their rent's going to be a little bit higher. we have what's called a utility allowance, which is based on an annual study we do of what should a utility run for, say, water and sewer on a 3-bedroom unit in San Luis Obispo. We do these, our accounting department does these studies. So based on that, if you pay your own utilities, then because of the way the metering is set up, your rent is going to be lower based on whatever that utility allowance is. If we pay that utility, your rent's going to be a little bit higher, again, based on the utility allowance study that is done each year.
Okay. I'm partly interested in that because if you're separately metered and everybody has their own heat pump, then you're going to have 105 condensing units on the roof,
Okay.
right? And so how is that going to be? Is that all parapeted off or, and you'll need roof access for maintenance and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I won't get too deep down that.
No, totally,
rabbit hole, but-
absolutely. That would be the goal, right? And they can only be a certain distance away from the unit, so you would want to be spreading them all out on the roof plan, so you could feed vertically all the way down to all your different units. That we've been doing that on all our current projects.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to hit too that every time we design to a solar standard and we build all those panels in and we do it this way, when we 2 or 3 years later when we go to build, solar just keeps getting more and more efficient and we find, oh, great, we planned for what it was 3 years ago and by the time we get there, it's in a
It's
good spot.
already better than it was a year or two ago. Last question, you mentioned tuck under parking. Is there parking underneath the triplexes now?
There used to be when they were duplexes, which was what we presented to ARC, but when they asked us to reduce the massing on California and reduce the amount of parking that we provided being fed off Palm Street, those were taken away, and the units that used to be associated with the senior, we went ahead and put them into the family project instead and made those duplexes into triplexes.
Okay, and what kind of parking is there for each triplex? Because it looked like from the diagram you had one parking spot for each triplex.
That is correct. It's a ground floor unit, and so it's going to be required that it's an accessible space, and so we added an accessible parking space in front of each of those triplexes to make sure that it would be parked.
So the other units in the triplex will park in the parking garage?
The top
or
level.
The top level, okay.
Mhm, you got
All
it.
right. Thanks for all those answers.
No, that's great. You did have a question earlier about the height. Do you want me to expand a little bit on that, or do you feel like you got your answers?
We could probably talk for way too long about
Okay,
that.
no
Let's-
problem. I just wanted to make sure you had everything you
Yeah.
needed.
Commissioner Munoz Morris.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of quick questions, one for you and maybe one for staff. You're about to get some of it tonight, but I was wondering how much community or neighborhood engagement has there been so far during the design process, if any?
Yeah, we actually talked to a few of the neighbors at the tree committee and talked to a few of them after the ARC. A few of them sent us pictures of their backyards, and we did some overlays for them and sent it, I think it was to Teresa, she might be here tonight, and sent her those pictures so she could understand what the project would look like from her backyard. Just to get a little effort of it in that manner. I know that Haslo has talked a little bit more to the neighbors than I have, but did we have a session where we all met and all the neighbors came? No, but we have been in contact with them.
Gotcha, thank you. And I know I should have asked this earlier, but I apologize, but maybe this is more directed at city staff. Regarding parking, specifically on any public street really, but does the city have any legal mechanism for restricting street parking for specific properties?
Only if a parking district is established, which requires a review process and votes within the residences that live in that portion of the community. So if this neighborhood wanted to establish a parking district, they could apply, and I believe that actually has occurred a few years ago, maybe over a decade ago for this area, but they could certainly contact our transportation division if they were interested in applying for a parking district.
Gotcha. But that would be a neighborhood-wide effort, not a specific site. So in other words, if we were to put parking permit guidelines for that section of Palm Street, that would apply to everybody, not just this project? Is that correct?
Everybody would be treated fairly.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? With that, Deputy Clerk, can we start the public comment period, please?
Thank you so much for your guys' time.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Chair. We've got a number of folks that would like to speak on this item, so I'll announce the first couple of names. If you could just approach the podium and make sure that you speak into the mic so that the system will record your comments. The first speaker will be Angela Kasperzak. Following her will be Rachel Mann.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Angela Kasperzak, and I have lived in the SLO City's affordable housing projects for almost a decade. I have a good job with the county, but without the city's commitment to affordable housing, I would not have been able to afford to buy or rent in SLO. I was able to save for my place by taking advantage of one of Haslo's programs and had to win a lottery to get a chance to live here. Before moving here, I would commute from Paso. During football season especially, on occasion, I would be in SLO from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. with my children. It was an added hardship on all of us. I grew up in public housing and on public assistance, and when my children were small, we lived in public housing. The city has a goal of improving diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I don't think this can be accomplished without large projects such as this. It is upsetting to see community members who are against these type of projects. I'm a very active and valuable member of SLO City, and I feel like these people want to exclude people like me. I do not believe that complaints regarding the size or aesthetics of this project are valid reasons to exclude people who can't afford to live here otherwise. And I don't feel that claims that people don't feel safe around people that come from similar backgrounds that I do should even be acknowledged. Thank you.
All right, Rachel Mann.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Rachel Mann. I live in Grover Beach, where I am also a planning commissioner. My comments tonight are my own. I work here in SLO at Promega Biosciences, which is down off of Higuera. We have a number of employees, my coworkers, who are very important to our organization, who do make underneath the threshold that would be considered low income. Many of them live quite a ways away, Paso, San Miguel, Orchid, and they're commuting every single day. Now, my commute from Grover Beach, I calculated based on some information I learned from some comments at the tree committee. My commute is about 103 trees a year in terms of emissions. So while I respect the concern about removing some trees and then replacing them with slightly smaller ones, I think we need to think about how many workers in this city could reduce their commutes by being able to live here. You have I did send in an email, so I don't want to belabor everything that's in that, but I encourage you to approve this project. It's a good one. Your staff has worked really hard to review it. Lots of people put in time and effort to get your general plan where it is, and this meets those requirements. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Susan Pyburn and then Miles Couch.
I'm Susan Pyburn. Today I heard some stunning information. I was in a meeting of the Homeless Services Oversight Council. And what I heard was that the 5 Cities Homeless Coalition reported that in October of 2020, they received 330 calls requesting homeless prevention assistance. This year, just last month, which would be October, 2 years later, that number rose to 864. Many of the rents that have pushed these people to be requesting assistance have increased in just like one jump, from as much as $1,100 to $2,100 a month. Well, you can understand why these people need homeless prevention assistance. Furthermore, the California Rental Relief Program, which offered assistance during the peak of COVID, will be suspended next March. So there is a tidal wave of homeless families anticipated in the coming year. This project will help families and seniors in our city desperately in need of affordable housing. I live just a little over a block away. And while I realize there are valid concerns about size and location, on balance, I believe the overall benefit to our community, as beset as it already is with homelessness, requires concessions be made. So as to the height issue and the neighborhood disparity of a 5-story development, which has already been mentioned. As distasteful as that may be from an aesthetic point of view, I commend to you the following quote from the Environmental Protective Agency of the federal government. Quote, "Building denser housing will help minimize sprawl, protecting the natural environment. Think building up, not out. Plus, less sprawl also leads to shorter commutes and decreased carbon emissions. Denser developments consume less land to accommodate the same number of houses. Consuming less land creates less impervious cover in the watershed. Increasing development densities is one strategy communities can use to minimize regional water quality impacts." And this is from July 7th of 2021. As for trees, no one wants to see them removed. I commend what they're already recommending, and looks like they're going to circumvent that by mitigating with more trees. So I urge you to approve this project with all those appropriate mitigations, and I hope that many more families might benefit, which will it'll really benefit our community at large. And I want to thank Director Smith and the architects. Thank you very much.
All right, Miles Couch, and then Krista Jeffries.
Those are some very eloquent comments to follow, and I agree with all of them. I live across from Mitchell Park, so I do see the effects of our housing shortage every day outside my house. And I'm really excited for this project. I got to see the ARC presentation, and I think they've made some smart changes. And I'm just really impressed with, as someone who loves walking around the city, how this kind of blends in and would, I don't know the architectural lingo, but it seems kind of inviting and engaging with the street and with the community. And I think it would be a great addition. Thank you.
Krista Jeffries.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am a former board member of the Five Cities Homeless Coalition, and I'm also a current board member of the SLO Nonprofit Housing Corporation. And when I reviewed this project, I got really excited, number one, because it's beautiful. I think the house that I paid a whole lot of money for, and I couldn't qualify to live in this building. Let's get that clear. I couldn't qualify to live in this building. My house is a lot uglier than this proposal that's in front of you tonight. And the project is legally entitled to be a lot uglier, a lot bigger. And even if it was a lot uglier and bigger, I could throw a dart. I won't because I'm bad at it. But if I could throw a dart at this Venn diagram you've got on the wall, it would hit right in the middle for everything that the city is trying to do. All of the city's goals are checked off with this project. And so while some of the aesthetic changes to the neighborhood might be hard for some people to swallow, I know that we don't like the aesthetic changes of homelessness, trash, the creek being polluted. There is a cost to doing nothing in addition to change. There is a cost to leaving things the same and letting things continue, and then there's a cost to accepting change that we have decided to support with this Venn diagram over on the wall. So I would highly encourage you to support this project as is, and thank you so much for your time.
Next, we'll have Neil Sistek, and then Ann Hodges.
Good evening. Thanks for taking my comments. My concern is about safety on this project, particularly vehicle and pedestrian safety. I used to live on Palm Street, between the railroad tracks and California, and I know that seeing Palm Street as a one block cul-de-sac, having ingress and egress from this project onto California for the residents is going to cause problems. The driver's sight line for cars coming down that steep hill in California is really not on Palm Street. It's on the light at Monterey. They want to know, is it going to be red? Is it going to be green? Am I going to get through? The intersection with Palm and California is already partially obscured by vegetation on a private lot. So I know from experience that that's a tough intersection. Turning left out of Palm Street to go towards Cal Poly and Highway 101 is tricky. There's no traffic control there. There's no pedestrian crosswalk. It's kind of a nightmare. Cars coming down the hill speed up, even though they're obeying the speed limit at the top. By the time we get to the bottom, they're going a little bit faster, and it's not safe as it is. Adding the additional traffic there is going to be a problem. I also have a problem with the parking concessions. When I go to visit my friends on Palm Street, the only place I can park is in their driveway because the current residents use all of the available street parking. There's very rarely a spot left. So if the project does not provide enough parking, and I know there's a concession here, if they don't provide enough parking, where are the extra cars going to park? Where are the caregivers going to park for the seniors? Where are their visitors going to park? To the west are the railroad tracks. You can't expect caregivers to cross the railroad tracks and trespass. To the north, it's kind of a diagonal, so it's kind of hard to describe it. To the north, across towards Grove Street, there may be parking over there, but can a pedestrian really cross California at Palm? No, that's the bottom of the hill. And any other parking on Monterey? Parking on Monterey is already pretty limited. If you had a bus stop there, that takes way more parking. It seems to be an issue for me. And I believe this project is unsafe as planned, and I encourage you to deny it as designed. Thanks.
Ann Hodges, and then we'll have Ann Wyatt.
Hi, I went to the ARC meeting, and they said there was no traffic study done on this project, which absolutely pushes my buttons, because all over town, there is congestion, and they say, see how it makes traffic flow easier? It does, because they're on the freeway heading south or north. My problem with this is they say, oh, there's going to be a bus stop on Monterey. I am familiar with this area. There hasn't been a bus on Monterey for probably a decade, if not more. It's on California. We were told it couldn't go on California because the traffic's too heavy, which I agree, but it doesn't take a study to know that the intersection of Monterey and California is a problem. It has been a problem for decades. People coming down, heading north from French Hospital, Rigetti Ranch, the high school, come up to California to get onto the freeway. They make a right onto Higuera, a left onto Grove, and shoot up Monterey because that intersection is too impacted. You guys haven't figured it out. You put one pedestrian in a crosswalk and you put gridlock for blocks. You say you're gonna say, oh, we don't need these extra parking spaces. And the gentleman was right, they're gonna be on the street. If you make it a parking district, will the people who live in the housing be able to take a parking permit out? You have a new bike path. Where does that bike path go? It's on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. Union Pacific really frowns on people on their tracks. Are you going to connect that onto Palm and have them go up California from the bottom of the hill so they can't even get speed up to make it to the stoplight? You have, this is a tough site. It has had flood problems in the past. That's where that little creek is. It does flood. You have, I see that they did change. They said, oh, the papers or the pictures at the ARC showed that it was a blank wall onto California. So all of the apartments looked into the center. And you haven't adjusted, given it loading zones for trucks, for like Cisco for the restaurant, or somebody delivering drugs. You gotta figure out the traffic. All you're doing is telling people they're unwelcome in town. If I can't get downtown, I don't go there.
Next up is Ann Wyatt, and then Aaron Abbott.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Ann Wyatt. I'm pleased to be here this evening representing the Healthy Communities Working Group. The Healthy Communities Working Group is a collaborative between public health officials, land use and transportation planners, nonprofits, academia, and community members, and it works to improve health through community design. We provide research and evidence-based recommendations from a health perspective. The Healthy Communities Working Group strongly supports this project and the much-needed 100% affordable homes in this prime infill location proximate to services with multiple opportunities for sustainable transport options. I'm really pleased to hear about bike parking and how many questions there were on not enough bike parking. Pleasant surprise and nice the way things have changed around. I hate that there wouldn't be enough bike parking. I biked here tonight, and I think obviously this infill location is indeed a prime spot that's amenable to cycling. I had just one idea. I haven't scrutinized this plan, but I've spent some time in Portland, a bike mecca, and I've used some wonderful bike parking areas within car garages. So it may be just some option if you're concerned about bike parking spaces. Maybe there could be some way to take over a space or two in the parking garage for bikes. Again, not without a lot of scrutiny to the plan, but maybe there's some way that since this is fairly decently parked without much of a reduction, that may be something that could be done down the line, kind of depending on how things go. So just throwing that out there as an option for more bike parking without reducing the commercial and the income calculations that have been done there. I hear the concern about height and traffic and scale. This will be very different from what's there now. New trees will indeed take time to grow. 5 stories isn't new to San Luis Obispo. Just want to point out that the Anderson Hotel, 5 stories, has been a wonderful landmark downtown for something of a century now. I'd like to congratulate Haslo and RRM on this not only necessary, but also beautiful design. I encourage you to approve it. Thank you.
Aaron Abbott, and then Kirk Spiegel.
Good evening. I'm Aaron Abbott. I am a home builder and a housing advocate. My office is actually just about a block away from this site's location. Recently attended the Central Coast Economic Forecast, and for anyone who attended, you heard loud and clear that the biggest thing holding our economy back and the biggest challenge that we have is housing, and especially affordable and multifamily housing. Some of the consequences of this is we're actually losing significant population in lower educated, lower waged population, while we're growing graduate and collegiate and graduate workforce and population, and as well as older populations. So I think this is like the number one, it was pointed out as the number one challenge we have. I bring this up just because I think it's very appropriate for this project. This is a fantastic project and a fantastic location. I think Haslo's done a phenomenal job addressing the concerns as best they can. But the reality is this is close to government, it's close to Cal Poly, it's close to our biggest job centers, it's close to the hub of hotel zone and retail, all of these industries that need more workers and are not able to get them because they can't afford the housing. No project's perfect for everybody, but this is a very beautiful and effective and extremely fantastic location for a project like this to the benefit of the entire community. Thank you.
All right. Kirk Spiegel, and then the last speaker is Les Beck.
Well, I'm Kirk Spiegel, and I wish I could have the enthusiasm that Haslo and these people have for this project. I don't deny that it's not a bad project. It's just in the absolutely wrong location. I happen to be the guy that everybody's so concerned about. I live at 1411 Palm Street. My home is directly behind this project that's going to be built. I'm going to have a 2-story parking structure 3 feet off my back fence. I can hardly wait to hear all the car alarms being set all hours of the night. I'm 73 years old. I'm being driven out of my home. You're building Trump Towers at the corner of California and Monterey Street. I thought these types of projects were supposed to be fitting in with the community. A 5-story building doesn't fit in with the single-story structures that are all around it. And it's 5 stories plus another, 9, 10 feet for all the other antennas and everything else that go on top of this building. So it isn't a 54-foot high building. You know, it's going to be something around 63 feet high. I'm losing every view that I ever had in my home, and I'd hate to see what they'd build if they weren't so concerned about their neighbors. The traffic, the biggest problem is going to be this traffic. It's going to be a traffic nightmare for decades. It's already a traffic nightmare. Ask anybody that has to go out there in the mornings to get to work and coming home. What the lady said there, everybody takes a right turn on the street before Monterey and goes down to Grove and then turns on Grove and then heads for the freeway. This is going to not only impact just that general intersection, but it's going to impact all the residences around it. I can tell you exactly where this project should have been built. It should have been built on the northwest corner of Broad Street and Tank Farm. It would have fit there perfectly. You'd have all the shopping and the supermarket right across the street. You've got all the medical and dental and all those things directly across the street on Tank Farm. So why it's being built where it's being built is beyond me. And if you think you've got problems now with that intersection, and my wife has already been hit waiting for the traffic light to change on Monterey Street when she was going to make a right turn on California coming down the hill. So there's been numerous bicyclists hit at that intersection. It's a bad intersection the way it sits right now. So wait till you've got all this other traffic coming off of this project. You know, why this project, if you could imagine taking 60 or 70 cars and putting them on Palm Street, and they're all trying to get out on California at 7 o'clock in the morning, what do you think's going to happen there? They'll be lined up to the back, to the end of the cul-de-sac. You know, if you really wanted to make some changes on this project, why don't you take Palm Street and put it through across the railroad tracks? But they're not going to do that because that costs money. You know, I don't see why I have to suffer because Haslo wants to get away on the cheap. Yeah, I just can't imagine why we're going to let Trump Towers be built in our little city here. It just doesn't fit in where it's at.
Thank you, sir.
The last speaker is Les Beck.
It's on, okay. Well, my comments to the great speakers, I wish I could speak as well as all the people that were, you know, from Haslo and et cetera. I just got to say, I was raised in a low-income housing project, but again, the location was correct. I had a single mom, 2 kids raising me there, so I know the need for that. But again, like Mr. Spiegel said, location. And the parking problem, I see that. I live 2 blocks on the other side of the tracks on Palm Street, so it doesn't really affect me, but I'm hearing neighbors of mine that live near the Spiegels, and they're going to be probably forced out of their homes because they've lost, this is their lifetime living space, so they're going to probably not like all that traffic and business and the hassle of the parking and the cars. And I'm wondering how much surveying has gone on with the local businesses along that line, Splash Cafe, the Franks. Could it affect them? Could they be out of business because now there's no more parking because of the additional parking that's happening? They're going to lose business. I've been here since '67. We've lost so many local businesses because of parking downtown, or of course big corporations coming in. And some of these places have been around for just our icons here. Splash Cafe's been there for a long time. So I see parking as a major, major issue also. And not to mention that the people that live on Palm Street, even permitted parking only, probably won't solve it. My other thing is crossing the railroad tracks. Right there on Palm Street, there's no fence there. I owned a house on Murray Street that I sold. Murray Street, the end of Murray where it meets railroad tracks, they built a great big fence going from there all the way to Cal Poly to keep people from going across those tracks. What's the railroad company going to say when there's going to be more and more traffic of people walking across that track? And are they going to put up another fence that looks like a prison fence? So I end up selling that house, just because, anyway. So I comment that people, yes, we need the Section 8 housing, but location should be addressed on this. The parking is going to be horrendous. Already you go to Splash Cafe, and I love that place. I can hardly find a place as it is to park there. So, and then how late are these restaurants? The restaurant, I'm wondering how late that's going to stay open. And is there a bar in there where it's going to keep people even coming in late at night near the neighbors? So I would like to see that addressed. I don't know how late that restaurant's going to be allowed to stay open, or if there's a bar in there, that could be up, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. I'd like to see all that addressed. So I think there's more to address. Location, let's build the houses for Haslo and et cetera. I know what that's like, but wrong location in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments in the audience? Seeing none, back to the commission for discussion. Could you turn off your number? Cancel your number. Thank you. You're welcome. Anybody would like to start? Yeah, Mr. Jorgensen. It's like Jeopardy.
I'll just say a couple of things. One of the things is, I think we've already learned, at least at this commission, that infill is really hard to design, hard to move into, hard for neighbors who live near it. It's like being kind of shoehorned in, and it may cause a few blisters. I've walked the area on Palm Street, the kind of cul-de-sac area there, and it will be impacted. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But it's also true that the neighbors now have a 2.5-story building that they're looking at, that there's parking access from Palm Street. There's there's a dentist. There's on the other side of the street. It's definitely an urban area. But I do think with the kind of conditions we've set for this and the way that it's planned, that this may be certainly as good as I think we can get. And it has a lot of advantages for the city. This area, from the city's point of view, is one of 2 or 3 in the whole downtown area where higher density and bigger heights do make a lot of sense. In that I would include, not the downtown area, but the foothill area where we're seeing more Cal Poly housing going. I think is also a good place for that. But Lower Marsh is another area where I think we'll see more high-rise, and we'll want to see better transit to make that even work better. But this took a lot for Haslo to assemble these parcels, and I think it actually is smart to take all of the waivers that they can. They didn't take them all, but it's just, we really need this kind of housing. And this project really improves the streetscape there. It's includes certainly the walking experience, the large plazas, the public access, what could have been easily just a massive wall. This is going to be higher, but I think it actually provides a standard because the kind of planning that the city is doing is expecting more apartment and denser housing in this whole area as kind of a natural feeder for downtown businesses of all sorts. It's on the path and a route to Cal Poly, so that there's a lot of foot traffic already. I think business is going to do really well here. I live off of Johnson, not far from the French Hospital, and there is certainly traffic from there. There are certainly times of the day when school is going in or out where I don't want to go on San Luis Drive and then to California to the freeway. You do have to find an alternative. It's definitely traffic full, and there certainly are commuters using Orchid, Johnson, California to avoid the freeway. I mean, it's so obvious how heavy the traffic has gotten, particularly in the afternoons. But I think we'll see some improvements in the intersection there, and I think we just have to make some adjustments and make it work. But I think really this is actually a well-planned development I think we can be proud of, and I think especially the way that it's articulated, I think we're all going to find that it's going to work really well. So I can support this, and I'm fairly optimistic that we can all make the little adjustments that are going to be necessary to make this whole part of the town work as smoothly as possible. Thank you.
Commissioner Francis?
Thank you very much. And I wanted to echo Commissioner Jorgensen's comments on the fact that this is we need to acknowledge the fact that this is going to have a significant impact on the residents who live in close proximity to this development. And I think it's important to hear what they have to say and to really take that into account as we move forward with the project. But I'm also just incredibly thrilled to see a 100% affordable housing project going in, especially in this area that is so close to downtown and so close to so many of our commercial areas. It is one of the very best ways for us to be meeting our climate goals and our DEI goals, and I'm really excited to see that we're going to have 106 units that are all affordable there. I do have some concerns about accessibility with all of these senior units and the reduced parking and bike parking for them. I just want to make sure that we're really taking into consideration that they're not going to be isolated in these homes and that they have access to other forms of transportation. Particularly, we know our bus system took a major hit during COVID, and it isn't the reliable form of transportation right now. We're working really hard as a city to get it back, but it isn't necessarily that reliable form of transportation it needs to be. And while we work to get there, I want to make sure that our seniors and the other folks in these residents do have access to the forms of transportation. I'm also really glad to see that condition 47 for the crash analysis was included in there so that the developer is going to pay their fair share for making California, the intersection between California and Monterey there, a lot safer. We have a turning lane potentially coming in and modifications for pedestrians and for that separated bike path. So I'm eager to see that move forward quickly. This is a project that I can get behind completely, and I really hope that the developers will take some of the comments that they heard tonight into consideration moving forward. And thank you very much.
Commissioner Munoz-Morris?
Thank you, Chair. I want to start my remarks by expressing my appreciation for all of the letters that we've received and all the public comments here tonight, the vast majority of which have been, from a position of empathy and understanding and whether you agree or disagree with the project, have been respectful. I would say with the exception of maybe one, which was rather threatening, but it was from an outside organization, so we'll put that one aside. But I really do appreciate all of the comments that we received. I do read them all, and I do appreciate receiving them, and it's really nice to see so much of the community turn out, again, regardless of what side you are on this project. So I appreciate that. It's not always been my experience as a commissioner to receive such respectful comments, so it's nice. And I echo a lot of the concerns that have already been shared by fellow commissioners. But I wanted to highlight once again, thank you to city staff for sharing the land use plan with me, which I found very informative, and I encourage you all to find it on the city's website. Page 92, section 8.2.2 talks about the Upper Monterey corridor, and it talks about an emphasis on revitalizing and enhancing the area. And section B says the city shall integrate a new downtown transit center in the Upper Monterey area. Section D talks about promoting restaurant development in the Upper Monterey area, which with a previous project that we saw, we recognize, I think, that there's not much of that in that section of town. And overall, I think this fits really nicely with what the Monterey corridor is aiming to be. Perhaps not today. Perhaps not, that intersection is not what it should be today. But I think as commissioners, we have to plan for the future and not necessarily for the present. And I don't think I haven't heard anybody really object to bringing more affordable housing to San Luis Obispo, which I think we can all agree is not only necessary so we can house everybody regardless of how much money you make in our community, but it's also, as somebody pointed out, an economic driver for the city. So I think those are very important points to make. I appreciate the efforts that Haslo and their partners have made to provide an aesthetically pleasing, in my opinion, project, one that I feel fits nicely with kind of the feel, the vibe that San Luis Obispo has. I see elements there of older brick buildings. I see kind of a connection of this somewhat separated Monterey section with the downtown area. And I think that's worth noting. So I really appreciate all the efforts. I specifically appreciate the fact that this project, large as it may seem, is not as large as it could have been by right. And I commend Haslo for that and their partners as well. And I will be supporting this project tonight, but I do so with kind of a caveat that, the traffic analysis and the crash analysis and kind of potential improvements to that intersection and to the area in general, which I know are coming, might need to be a little bit more fast-tracked because of the big impact this project will have in the area rather quickly. So, yeah, just that's it for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Howden?
Thank you. I'm pretty new to this. This is only my second meeting. I didn't know this was coming. I got this in the packet a week ago when it got published. And I've been through a bit of an evolution on it just over the last week. The first thing I did was look at the pictures, right? And I just went, whoa, here it comes. This is pretty big. And my next thought was, well, this has got to be a mix of market rate and affordable. They probably just did the minimum affordable to be able to get the density and then I saw, oh, this is 100% affordable projects and includes senior housing. And so as I went through the proposal packet in greater and greater detail, I evolved to understanding more about why this is an important project. And so I've come around to being in support of it. I have a couple of concerns that I'll mention, but I really appreciate the comments that were all submitted. I read all of them, even the ones that came in at like 3 this afternoon. And I went and walked the site myself as well. And I would point out a couple of things. I appreciated the comment that there's a cost to doing nothing and to not doing projects like this. That's very true. And the alternatives that I see for a site like this, I look at whatever it is, the fancy houses that got put up on Marsh Street. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The ones that are trying to look different, but they all look the same. And they're 3 stories, and they're single-family townhomes or something, and sorry, RRM, if you designed those. Was that you, David? Okay, what does that do to revitalize or vitalize our community at all? You take almost an entire city block for 8 mostly empty, probably second homes, is what it looks like to me. And so this, I do believe, is a crucial element in vitalizing, and I don't think we need to revitalize. Our town already is vital, but this helps. This pushes us in the right direction. And Mr. Beck, I hear your comments about Splash Cafe, and well, there's going to be nowhere to park to go to Splash. Well, Splash can maybe hire somebody that lives in this thing now, right? And that can walk to work. It's crucial we have to shift the way we look at these things. We can't be looking at a housing unit as a place that we drive to and drive from on the way to and from work. This is part of the solution where we get people to be in the fabric of the community, close in, so they don't have to drive everywhere. It's not going to eliminate all car trips, and people still have cars, and despite the visions of millennials shedding their cars, it's not really true. I asked my students at Cal Poly who has a car, and 4th-year students, they all do. I mean, so I'm not naive on that, but we do need to move in this direction. The specific things, and the other alternative is, I mean, I was surprised to see what's there right now. That's 2-story building right behind, I think it's number 1411, Mr. Spiegel's house. That's a big wall, and that's going to go away, and the new building is taller, but it's set quite a bit further back, and I think that given the constraints of what you guys had to work with as designers and trying to get everything in there, I'm impressed that you were able to treat it with the sensitivity that you did. And no doubt it's going to be an impact for Palm Street, but I think it's also going to have positives, possibly for Palm Street, but certainly for the city. And okay, so I'm concerned about the Palm Street egress onto California. I'm a bicyclist. I come down that hill and I'm booking just like everybody is, right? And so I don't know if the plan is to put in a traffic light there or what, but anybody coming off of Palm, coming out of that, and two-thirds of that garage are all feeding out of Palm Street now, right? So that's like 60 car spaces. And what are they going to do if they have to get to 101 North? I think actually what they'll do probably is they'll take a right and then take a left on Monterey and go up that way, right? But I hope that gets thought through, because that seems like a conflict. And there's people coming down that hill, it's fast. The point that somebody had about caregiver parking for the senior, Scott, maybe you've got a handle on what that's all about, or if that's an issue. That struck me as something that's a real concern, because they probably don't live nearby, whoever that caregiver is. I mean, maybe they live maybe you get lucky and they live right next door in Building 1, but who knows? And then the point about more creative bike parking and being prepared for the cargo bikes and all the new stuff that's coming around for mobility. My mom is 81, and she has this little like 3-wheeled scooter thing that she cruises around in. Where would she park that if she was in one of these units? So I think there's going to be more and more of those kinds of technologies that are going to help people get around and that are not cars. And those are all part of the solution too. So with that, I'll stop, but nice job. I'm in support.
Commissioner Cooley?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to duplicate a lot of the comments we've already heard, because I mostly agree with them. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. I wanted to emphasize, again, how exciting adding this much affordable housing is, and it's just too compelling to ignore. But of course, there are trade-offs, right? I had some heartburn as well about the tree removal. I think that the applicant has done their best to mitigate that. And again, I wanted to call back to one of the comments we heard from the public about how, don't think about just the carbon sequestration that we're losing from mature trees to younger trees, but also think about the carbon impact from commutes. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And that's something that helped me get over a little bit of that heartburn. I also have some concerns about the traffic safety, and I want to see those studies when they come out. But, you know, I know that area well. I live downtown, I walk downtown, I work downtown all the time, and I walked by it again today just to make sure that I understood. And everyone's correct. California and Monterey is kind of a mess. So I do want to see those studies as well. But again, I think those are part of the trade-offs we need to make here. I do also want to highlight that this is also only my second meeting, and I'm coming into this a little late. So having said that, I was really impressed with the modifications that the applicant made in response to ARC. I thought those were very thoughtful, especially considering the short time frame. I thought that was very impressive. And so I'm excited to see where this goes from here too, as things get more fully fleshed out. Along those lines, mentioning that I do live and work downtown, this, as was mentioned by one of the public commenters, it's a really beautiful project too. It is nicer and fits into the community even better than it had to. And I'm looking forward to this being part of the community that I live and work in as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to make a comment. First of all, I agree with all my fellow commissioners on the affordable housing project and the overall project. So I'd just like to state that that was very eloquently stated by all commissioners, so I won't dwell on that. I would like to talk about the Palm Street. I have a question on the intersection of Palm and California. I visited the project site today and spent considerable time on Palm Street and that intersection trying to figure out a way to help mitigate the getting onto California, because I totally get it. It's expensive, excuse me, not expensive. It's a crowded corridor and it's difficult to turn left on to go to US 101, and we all have talked about it tonight. So I have a question to staff. Could we add a condition of approval that says that the applicant and his staff, or his applicant and the engineers and architects, will work with the City Public Works Department to look at a striping plan for the section of California from the Monterey intersection up to Mill? And what they would do is they would come in and do high visibility striping. Their striping is pretty worn out. You'd stripe up the bike lanes better. You'd stripe the two-way left turn better. You might even narrow the lanes a little bit. And what happens visually as people are coming down that hill and they see a narrower lane, it will slow some of your traffic down. I know this is not a solution, because I would love to see a solution. You can't put a signal there. It's too close to Monterey to put a signal there. You don't want to stop California and put a stop sign there, so that doesn't really work real well. But maybe a cost-effective striping plan for California that helps the people on Mill Street get onto the road and maybe slows the traffic down a little bit. So I would like to hear staff's input on that if they have any thoughts on that.
Yes, so in accordance with the density bonus law, we wouldn't be able to condition a project that would render the project infeasible. And so the added condition would also need a nexus for an identified impact. And so I would encourage the commission to work with the applicant on the wording of the condition in that it's something that can be agreeable and effective in resolving the concerns.
So just to clarify, to introduce a new condition of approval like this right now, what we would want is concurrence from the applicant, because this is something that they would be working with the Public Works Department, and then discretion for the Public Works Director to determine the scope of the changes being recommended. So what you presented, Chair Khan, is that the applicant would work with the Public Works Department on, a variety of striping options, but we have to make sure that there are options there that our traffic engineers and that our Public Works Director agree with would have an effect and improve, the environment, the safety for, vehicles. And to the extent that they could accomplish that and the applicant was agreeable, then that could happen as a condition of approval. Otherwise, it would be advisement for, our Public Works Department in terms of transportation operations. It's already an area that's monitored very closely. It's an area, obviously, with the high school that's impacted by those particular rush hours. Other times of the day, it's not as impacted, right? And in terms of turning movements from this intersection, even though this is a parking structure, it's a very small street relative to other local streets that intersect with California. And so, just through our analysis of the project through staff, we didn't come up with these conditions of approval as requirements with a nexus to a standard. But if there's some agreement on the part of the applicant and the ability for the Public Works Director to actually control what happens, then I think that is a discussion that could happen. You could ask the applicants if they were agreeable.
Yeah, I definitely intended.
If a majority of the commission is supportive of the concept.
I definitely intended for the Public Works Director to be able to have a discussion, to work with the applicant and his staff work with the applicant. If there's nothing that can be done for engineering reasons, that's fine. But I'd like to at least see the effort that it be looked into. So go ahead.
Sorry, Chair Khan, I was just going to ask if perhaps what was laid out in condition 47 with the developer paying in for California turning lane modification, if that might kind of be approaching some of what you're hoping to achieve with that collaboration. I know that doesn't involve striping all the way up, but I do imagine it is going to include an improvement of the bike lane and striping at that turning intersection. Is that a correct assessment, Kyle?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a great idea. Could I get the applicant's input of whether they'd be willing to add this condition? It would be something they would want willing to live with?
Chair Khan, members of the commission, I think what might be most appropriate is a motion to start that conversation.
Fine. Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Cowton.
There we go. What is the baseline for dealing with that intersection if we weren't to say anything else about it right now? What's already in place to try to deal with that? And I appreciate the concern. I have the same concern because I was mentioning it too. I'm not sure striping is necessarily the thing, and that's what you were suggesting. We don't know necessarily what the best solutions might be for car, bike, pedestrian at that intersection. And we've got professionals that are, I think at some level, going to be dealing with that this is an issue, right? So that's kind of what, I'm kind of assessing the need to put a condition on this at this point. Yeah. What happens if we don't? What are you going to do about this as a baseline? Or when? Yeah. And was this the 47 that you mentioned? Okay, I'm trying to find that. So,
right. So
that's my question.
The condition of approval would be in effect in terms of what our transportation engineers and planners evaluated with respect to the project. That was what was determined to be necessary and helpful to address any health and safety concerns associated with the project. In terms of what regularly happens with intersections across the city is that we have actually an award-winning program where our police department and transportation engineers collaborate on annual traffic safety reports where we actually have a funding mechanism through our transportation impact fee program so that areas that do exhibit safety concerns, unsafe patterns, that are areas that need attention rise to the priority for the spending of the money that's allocated to that fund. In this case, in fact, there's mention of improvements that are programmed for this project to accomplish to enhance the California Monterey intersection. That's a result of our traffic, safety program where a need has been identified. So first we do modeling to determine, the effect of a project like this, and we're proactive as much as possible. But in this case, we're not recommending any changes, but it will be monitored just like any other intersection in the city is monitored, and we fund based on priority.
So, and I knew most of that, I understand that. One reason why I recommended the striping is that you look at the corridor going down California, it's fairly narrow. So I was thinking of bulb outs because then you narrow the right of way with the bulb out, but then that would block the bike lane. So I couldn't see any physical type of barrier in the right of way being appropriate at this time unless you widen the entire corridor. That's why I thought something like striping would be cost effective. and could be viable. That was my thinking.
So I'm looking at condition 47 here. As Commissioner Francis pointed out, it says California Boulevard, Monterey Street intersection improvements. And Palm Street is not really mentioned there, right? So it's only 100 feet or so away, but is it considered part of that whole area? Are we covered with, maybe we're not. Maybe that's not specific enough.
Yes, some verbiage could be added to that, says that the California Boulevard, Monterey Street intersection and California Street up to Mill, something very simple could be, or we could add another, we have A, B, we could add a C that just merely says the, stretch of California between Mill and Monterey would be studied to see if striping can help the access of Palm Street onto California. I would like to hear what the applicant has to say about their thoughts on the thought.
We were chatting about it. Thanks for bringing up that. I think as far as striping goes, I think that's a great solution to be able to look at enhancing along that street. I think we would want to work with Public Works to, see how that would play out. You're right, we want the professionals to be able to look at the traffic, but we're not opposed to language that talks about, thinking about restriping along California. Could be a good idea, especially even just enhancing its width to be able to narrow those lanes. That's an interesting thought to slow people down, yeah.
Thank you very much. With that, does anyone want to take a shot at making a motion and incorporating that into it? I don't think the chairman's supposed to make a motion.
I'd be happy to, but I just want to ask a clarifying question, maybe to city staff. Can we make such a requirement of the applicant? And if so, what's the criteria for how far away from the site we can require street improvements, I guess?
So the answer would be the process we just went through, have the applicant come up, have that discussion, have them agree to exploring additional striping improvements. That was concurrence that they were accepting of a modified condition or a new condition to that effect.
Okay,
So how far away it is isn't really material. It's more of exploring, what those options are, and they're agreeing to do that.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is not very actionable language. It's more about they're gonna commit to consider and review, but there's nothing that we can say, you will do X, Y, and Z beyond what is already in condition 47?
Correct.
Okay. If that's the case, I'd like that the applicant is willing to consider this, but I don't know that I would be comfortable adding additional conditions for approval beyond what's already in there, because it seems to already be in the works, and it wouldn't really be enforceable, it seems like.
Well, no, it would be enforceable. It would have a condition that says they will work with the City Public Works Department on California between Mill and Monterey to look at striping to help the access of the people on Palm Street. And then you would add at the end of it, the Public Works Director's approval. And if there's nothing that's found, the condition should be worded so that they don't have to do anything. But I would like the condition in there that is clear.
Okay, so basically expanding what condition
Yeah,
47.
like adding a
saying
C.
Another block.
Adding C to it that would just say, just a couple sentences that say, would look at the striping on California between Mill and Monterey.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that's a little bit clearer
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. And I would just as soon leave it to staff to come up with the wording on the condition.
Okay. Another quick, I'd be happy to make a motion
Okay.
including your comments, but I wanted to make sure that, is the motion that was presented to us today, I believe it does, but I just want to be clear, it includes the recommendations and responses or changes that the applicant has made based on the ARC and the tree committee? Okay, great. So, and if that's the case, and I'm probably going to butcher this, I would love to make a motion to approve the resolution with the added or the expanded language to section 47 that goes all the way to Mill, I believe you said, right?
Mill
Of
to
California,
Monterey.
with the whatever magic language city staff can come up with that covers Chair Khan's thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think staff understands the direction. Did we have a second on the floor?
I would second it, but I just wanted to ask, do we need to allow staff time to craft that language now, or can we approve and develop that language?
Kyle's taking great notes, and we'll craft that language. It's, with time, it's better to do that than on the fly.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, with that in mind, then I would second the motion.
Yeah. Sir, I see you in the back. We closed public hearing. I'm sorry. And I just have one more comment before we call roll call vote. I would like to encourage the neighborhood on Palm to apply to the city for a parking zone. I think that might be something of helpful to you, particularly people coming in to visit other people and parking on Palm. So it's just a suggestion. That it is a good process, and it is a process, but I think it might help you a little bit. With that, Deputy City Clerk, no, excuse me. Will Deputy City Clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Munoz Morris,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooley,
Aye.
Commissioner Francis,
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Yes.
Chair Khan,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
With that, could we have maybe a 3-minute recess for how about a 5-minute recess? So we will reconvene at 10 after 8. I'm reconvening the meeting at 8:16. We're now going to hear on the Climate Action Plan. I would like to invite Sustainability Manager Chris Reed to provide information, present on the Climate Action Plan.
Good evening, Chair Khan and members of the commission. My name is Bob Hill. I'm the city sustainability and natural resources official. I work really closely with Chris. He's going to give most of the presentation. I just wanted to provide a few introductory comments and first of all introduce myself. I know some of you, but not all of you, so it's really nice to be before this commission tonight, and thanks for your time to provide some comments and some feedback and input into our Climate Action Plan Volume 3, which sets forth the 2023 through 2027 work program and furtherance of our Climate Action Plan goals as set forth by the City Council. Chris and I have been working together for a little while. I'll never forget the night we were in here and we had a study session with City Council to set sort of the goals for our Climate Action Plan so we could build it. And rather unexpectedly to both of us, we walked out that night with the direction to set forward a path to carbon neutrality by 2035. And so we had some work to do and some hard thinking to do and a lot of engagement. So that result of that was the Climate Action Plan for Community Recovery, Volumes 1 and 2. And we knew that there were going to be a variety of what we call foundational actions in that plan, things where we didn't know exactly what to do yet, so we were going to do a planning exercise or a pilot program. Examples of that is at the time we didn't have our active transportation plan, we didn't have our updated housing element, we didn't have any idea how we were going to do carbon sequestration in our green belt. We didn't know how to electrify buildings. We didn't know how to approach the ordinances for those kinds of things. So those were some of the really key foundational actions that we had to accomplish. And we knew that once we went through those exercises and we learned that we would then be able to further detail and refine our work program as far as implementation goes. So I think that really what we're here to talk about tonight is we've done a lot of learning, we've done a lot of pilot projects, and now it's time to get to work and roll up our sleeves and do implementation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris Reed. He'll talk a little bit about what the plan process has been. We'll talk a little bit about our public engagement process. We'll hear before your planning commission tonight, but also talking with the Human Resources Committee coming up in December. We've been to the Active Transportation Committee as well, and so we're out there gaining as much input from our citizens as possible, and we'll hear more about that. Thanks very much. I'll hand it to Chris.
All right, good evening. Chris Reed, Sustainability Manager. Bob noted I'll be leading the presentation tonight. And before we jump into the presentation, just to honor what Bob said around our process and where we've been over the last 2 years, I just wanted to share sort of 3 big takeaways that I think are important to, that we've gathered from this process and I think applied to this presentation, the plan moving forward. The first is that the work we've done to date has really affirmed the approach that council adopted in 2020, and you'll see that really the work is advancing and continuing that path. The second is that there's unprecedented federal and state funding and federal, state, and regional policy alignment that makes a lot of things possible that may not have been possible even 6 months ago. And finally, if we stay narrowly focused on what we've committed to and leverage those resources, we can be successful. So I just want, those are the sort of 3 takeaways that really underlie the work that we've been doing. Bob already touched on timing. The 2020 CAP explicitly articulates or gives staff direction to come back right away. I know we've had a lot of questions about why are we updating our climate action plan? Shouldn't we be doing climate action? And we have been doing lots of climate action, but as Bob said, there's really good reasons to do learning in this space where there was so much uncertainty and to have that approach affirmed. So we are doing a check-in update here. This will be followed in 2027 by a full climate action plan redo, and again in 2031 by a full redo. So that sort of sets the pathway forward from the planning process. Okay, just talk a little bit about how we updated the plan. Like any good planning process, we started with a technical analysis of our implementation to date. So we looked at all the actions we committed to, and we asked if we did them, and if so, how did they go? If we didn't, why not? And what should we do instead? We have in our current CAP a commitment to return to council with a progress report every 2 years, as well as reporting in the general plan report. And so you see on the left here, our 2020 Climate Action Plan progress report. And on the right, you see our update to that, which is actually included in the Climate Action Plan update. And we found that most of the actions that we committed to, we've either completed, they're sort of in operational ongoing status. There's a couple that we have hit pause or sort of redirected on or reoriented on, but largely affirmed the approach. In 2020, when we worked on our climate action plan, we wanted to talk to at least 1,000 community members. That was sort of our benchmark goal, and we were able to do that. And we think that plan is really deeply informed by community, but the demographics of the folks we talked to tended to skew pretty heavily towards folks that typically go to government events. And so we really wanted to lead with equity in our outreach in this space. And so one of the ways we did that is have really accessible large community events placed where people are already recreating. So that was really successful with our climate party. But we also wanted to have deep conversations with folks that don't typically participate in climate or local government processes. And so we held a series of roundtables broken apart by topic where we had technical experts and we had stakeholders, but we also had traditional stakeholders, but we also had affordable housing tenants, students, maybe someone who works for a local racial justice nonprofit. So folks that typically sit outside the climate space but are so valuable, because while our approach was affirmed, what's really critical for us is that those actions we committed to, as we set up the next set of tasks, we don't just reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but we intentionally orient those tasks to co-solve for the other major city goals that our council has adopted, and we use our ambition in the climate action space to deliver benefits in spaces like housing, mobility, and equity. And the last piece here, this is just to reiterate a point earlier, so we have a technical analysis on how things are going. We've had really deep community conversations on how we can deliver benefits, and then the question is, how do you pay for it all? And this is a really important point it's worth restating that with the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, the governor's climate budget passed this last summer, as well as a whole slate of legislation and regulatory actions by the state of California, the next 2 years are really, really critical, but also really lush time to do this work, where there's a tremendous amount of resources and technical support available. So again, making possible what was previously very challenging. So because of that, instead of saying we're going to throw the climate action plan out, have a whole bunch of new goals, a whole bunch of new actions, have some fun new covers, we decided to say, hey, we have this existing climate action plan. It tells stories from the future. It has our technical work program. And so we're just going to keep that. And what we're going to do with this update is provide the work tasks to continue implementing those actions in service to our existing goals. And that's the draft climate action plan that's available for review publicly right now. That public review closes tonight, but that we'll look forward to hearing some feedback on, and we'll take to council in December. That CAP is organized by 6 emission sector pillars. Lead by Example looks at local government operations. Clean energy systems looks at a clean, low carbon, accessible, affordable, and dependable electricity grid. Green buildings looks at how we plug our buildings into that clean electricity grid instead of combusting fossil fuels. Connected community looks at how we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, reduce our VMT, and provide access to electric vehicle infrastructure. Circular economy looks at how we can keep organic waste out of the landfill, and natural solutions looks at how we can manage our open spaces to both be more resilient to a changing climate while also being a carbon sink. We also have a number of administrative actions that direct us to come back with updates at certain points, to implement every single action through a deep lens of equity, and there's some other actions that were directed there. Obviously, we don't have time to go, this is just an informational meeting tonight, or informational presentation. We don't have time to go into every action in the climate plan, but just wanted to focus on 2 of those pillars that are the most relevant to the work of the Planning Commission, and give just a quick example of a couple of recent accomplishments and a representative example of the kinds of tasks that are in the draft Climate Action Plan update. So for green buildings, our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from existing buildings in half by the end of this decade. That's through all electric new buildings, which Council adopted a policy on just this summer. That'll go into effect at the start of next year. It's also understanding how we can drive all of these federal and state resources that are available to our building stock to help folks improve their homes at the lowest possible cost. So some of the example tasks that are in our climate action plan would be to create a green and healthy building service where we can connect a low-income household that might be eligible for $10,000, $20,000+ of federal and state rebates and incentives, and connecting them with those incentives, but also helping find contractors, access to financing, supporting with permit access, et cetera, so that we don't leave any money on the table and really drive that benefit to those households that would benefit the most from the work. But it's also looking at a policy framework. So as folks maybe have large additions or alterations, and there's opportunities for electrification at time of a permit pull, there's an opportunity to require that. And the other major sector that we'll focus on in this presentation is connected communities. This is really focused on achieving our adopted mode split objective that's in the land use element. And then which essentially means getting folks to, providing access to resources so folks can walk, bike, and bus around our community. And then for folks that can't or don't want to do that, providing access to electric vehicle charging infrastructure so they can buy a new or used EV and do that instead. Some examples of recent accomplishments, there are many, many, many. This is a very large sector, but they include adoption of the Active Transportation Plan and pretty rapid implementation of Tier 1 infrastructure projects there, adoption of the current cycle housing element and some really important policy work that's been completed there, an analysis of the value of slow transit and confirmation that it is something we should continue to operate, and then beginning to buy our first electric buses and update our bus yard to support those electric buses. Again, there's many tasks on connected communities, but just as an example of the types of tasks you'd see in the plan, it's a reassessment of a community bike share program, and if that's feasible and viable and can be done with staff resources, to launch one of those in the next couple years. Right now, we're launching a transit innovation study to ask how a city our size can deliver really high quality transit at an even higher rate to a more diverse population efficiently. And so we're completing that study over the next 6 months and sort of integrating that into future work programs, looking at how parking programs can be used to reduce vehicle miles traveled, continuing to implement the housing element, including, for example, looking at missing middle projects. So how can house scaled or buildings have multifamily purposes in them? How can we continue to increase density in terms of housing? And then finally, equity-focused public charging infrastructure. So many people live in apartments and don't have access to electric vehicle chargers or so much of our tenure in our households are renters. So where can we place public electric vehicle chargers near parks or something like that, so someone can have access to that infrastructure as they make those decisions? So again, there's many more actions, there's many more sectors. We'd be happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to give a quick presentation to you all, since we've done this several times, to Planning Commission. The next step will be closing the public review period this evening, and we'll be coming back to City Council on December 13th for adoption of the plan. With that, we conclude our presentation and would welcome any questions from the commission. Thank you.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Thanks. I liked how quick and brief that was. That was really very nice, since I guess I actually have heard it in another setting already. But, or at least some of this, and it's really exciting. So I'm going to multitask here for a second, because our next item after you finish here is to set some goals, or see if we want to adjust goals for the next couple of years. And there's two things on my mind right now. One of them is carbon sequestration. I can't even say it. There I go, sequestration. And we have all these items that come for us where trees have to be taken out and new trees are planted, and the tree committee seems to be, and I think maybe the way that the regulations work, do something like a 1-to-1, but nobody's looked at the science around which trees would make the most difference. How many trees? Is it better sometimes to plant those trees in other places? Somehow it seems like we ought to up our game a bit. People are certainly concerned about how many trees are being taken out. And we know how long it takes for even 10-foot tall trees. 25% of the trees in the Monterey project are to be 10 feet tall or more. It scares me a little bit. I see them long and slender and overwatered, and they may underperform for a couple of years, frankly. But it seems like, couldn't we take a bigger view of what it would mean to get really serious about reducing, about saving, putting carbon aside with trees and making it work, even if it does require upping the standards and the requirements we have for projects that are taking out trees. So I'm just curious your thoughts. Is the science there? It seemed like I was looking a year or two ago, and it was, well, they knew something about one particular tree at a certain stage in life, in a certain soil, in a certain climate, and that's all they knew. And there was a lot of extrapolation going from that, and far too much probably. So I'm just curious where that all stands and how this might fit into your natural solutions pillar.
Thank you, Chair Jorgensen. I'll answer your question in a few different ways. So our original climate action plan for community recovery did include the natural solutions pillar that you referred to, which articulated a new initiative to plant 10,000 new trees by 2035, which we called the 10 Tall Initiative. At that particular point in time, the sort of details of what that would exactly mean weren't clear, but we knew that there was a lot of interest in planting trees, and that overall we also were aware of the kinds of comments that are often expressed at this commission and elsewhere, and this overall feeling that the overall urban forest and community forest was starting to decline. And so that was a simple idea. It wasn't necessarily envisioned as being a compensatory mitigation program or that kind of a thing. However, what we do know is that a lot of our trees are planted by virtue of our engineering standards through building permits, through landscape plans and public improvement plans on larger subdivision projects. And oftentimes, like with the project that we just looked at earlier, there will be a need to replant trees that are lost through that project. So a couple of thoughts on that. One thing that, in general, whether it be trees or other things, I think it's always useful to be thinking about the sort of concept of advanced mitigation. Caltrans is an agency, for example, that does a lot of thinking about advanced mitigation. They know they're going to be building highways. They know they're going to have impacts, so they, rather than doing projects piecemeal and as they come, they think about these things ahead of time. Where are we going to create red-legged frog habitat or whatever the case may be, right? So that's a part of how we could be approaching trees, as well as be thinking not necessarily of a mitigation bank, but considering in advance, where could we create tree planting locations that might create a more meaningful habitat and that are more likely to be successful, rather than trying to shoehorn a few small trees into a very crowded housing area. So that's one thought that I have. Another thing that we're doing right now to further articulate these goals is we're working on the city's first ever community forest plan. And so we'll be coming to together with Public Works for a study session before City Council on January 10th of the coming new year. And ultimately, we're on the council's agenda forecast to come back and adopt in April on that. So I think a lot of the details about the value of the forest, the ecosystem benefits that accrues to the community, why it's a smart investment, will be really articulated there. And then lastly, we're working closely getting to the science with some of our friends at Cal Poly and Biological Sciences, really thinking about what does a future climate-oriented looking tree planting palette look like, right? So I went to the Urban Forestry Conference a couple of years ago, and they were saying, projections are that our weather patterns 20, 30, 40 years from now might be similar to what they're like in Long Beach, right? So we should be talking to the urban foresters in Long Beach. What are they planting? What's successful? Things like that. So you want to have a climate-smart planting palette. Lastly, the 10,000 Tree Initiative is some of those trees we envision to replace empty street trees. Where we have a well and a sidewalk and the tree for one reason or another was lost due to damage or disease, or it's just was an old tree, that kind of thing. Those will be some of the trees that we'll plant. We know that we can plant trees in our city parks. A lot of it, and of course in new development, but a lot of those trees will be native trees planted in city open space or in creek corridors. And the carbon sequestration magic really happens in that growth cycle. Big trees store carbon, but the actual sequestration is happening through photosynthesis and in that growth cycle as well. So I think that's a variety of things that maybe don't exactly get to the point that you're hoping to reach, Commissioner Jorgensen, but hopefully it's good food for thought.
But something might
and an
come out of it
indication
that
of where we're
allow
headed.
us to
Yeah.
start adjusting the regulations and maybe giving the tree committee more latitude. I did have a second question. I apologize, I'm definitely hogging the mic here right here. I'd like to see a transit fee attached to new buildings, to new units, with a larger goal of ending up with something like the arrangement we have with Cal Poly, where all students, I guess faculty and staff, is that true as well, can ride the transit for free, and Cal Poly pays a lump sum. I remember this from Santa Cruz and UC Santa Cruz, and how the shuttle system and bus system was really supported by what the university did. And trying to think out when we're looking along Monterey, and you can see after the farmer's market, the buses are actually full going to Cal Poly. It's one of the few times you ever see that. And we've got a natural corridor right there, and we've just approved a project right there that's just in a perfect spot to add passengers. So how could we get to the place where everyone in the city has a permit? I don't know if everybody pays for it, or it's half subsidized, or move in that direction and make something like, I guess if I try to take a 20-year view, maybe a 30-year view, it seems logical that there ought to be not just a trolley, but a real streetcar system, frankly, between Cal Poly and maybe running through Cal Poly and running down through downtown, at least to part of South Higuera, and that runs every 7 or 8 minutes. And everybody's contributing to it who's living downtown, for instance, and in a lot of ways, a lot of folks would have to contribute to it. But how do we move towards something like that when we see a project like this and there's 106 units and it seems like, gee, they ought to be contributing and then get better access to transit, somehow to break through this chicken or egg problem that we have, that we can get new electric buses, but we can't get anybody on them. And we can't get enough to run them often enough to get more people on them. We're still sort of stuck right there. And I'm just wondering what we can do there. That's my last question, I promise.
Thank you, Commissioner.
For the year.
I don't have all the answers to those questions, but I will say that those are the questions that we've been asking, that the community's been asking for a while now as we're thinking about how we achieve our mobility objectives, especially, I don't have the top of my head, but the mode split objective for transit, it's a pretty large percentage. It'd be a substantial increase over ridership today. We've taken all those questions and put them into a scope of work in this transit innovation study that we're working on right now that asks, is it possible to provide free to the user transit for some subset of community members? And if it is, how much does it cost? And if we want to invest in that, what does that come at the expense of? Is it possible to run micro transit? Is it possible to create or use an existing resource or tag on to somebody else's resource to create a single app that allows you to navigate the mobility options in the community? If there is a bike share, if there is RTA, slow transit, parking downtown, EV chargers, so that you can navigate your trip really seamlessly. There's a number of questions that are in that transit innovation study, and we'll be convening technical and community stakeholders to help answer those and guide the outcomes. Now, that's a long way between the study and then figuring out how that gets integrated in the work program, but certainly there is forward progress on answering some of those questions.
Thanks, Chris. I wanted to get a little bit more at your question as well. Thanks for letting us know what we're doing, particularly the Transit Innovation Study. I think that one thing to point out with our existing climate action plan, and what we're talking about tonight is really just an implementing work program of that, is that it's what's called a qualified cap in the context of the California Environmental Quality Act and CEQA. And so there are thresholds for greenhouse gas emissions. When a project exceeds those thresholds, that means that we need to really look seriously at what measures that project is going to undertake to offset those emissions as well. And so I think that that's one way to potentially look at a project that's an exceedance of its greenhouse gas emissions thresholds, can enter into a variety of different sort of a la carte menu programs that are overseen as well by the Air Pollution Control District to help offset those. And so I think that might be a way to look at what you're getting at. Regarding your specific question about fees, I wanted to defer to Tyler or Michael or even Marky about when we're looking at a fee program and if that type of a fee is even allowable.
Yeah, I'll be talking about that a little bit in the next item in terms of goal setting, but we are going to the City Council with a RFP to select a consultant to implement an update to our AB 1600 fee program, our infrastructure public facilities financing plan, last updated in 2018, and it's best practice to update those every 5 years.
Commissioner Cooley.
I just wanted to thank you both for the presentation and especially your responses to the questions. And I just wanted to give a brief plug for anyone who's interested in these topics, any members of the public that are still listening. Chris had a really good appearance recently on a local podcast called Agenda Breakdown, which I thought was a really easy to understand introduction to the pillars specifically of the plan. And I just would recommend anyone who is interested in these topics to seek that out. Was that a couple of weeks ago? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Francis.
Excited to hear the agenda breakdown plug there. That was great. I actually had a quick question just about a specific bullet on there, the drive resources towards create parking programs to reduce the VMTs. What does that look like? Can you give me an example of what kind of program that would be?
Yeah, I think that there's just a number, it means a number of things in the plan. This is one of the least articulated of the tasks because there's a number of things that are happening in this space. The action that exists in the current plan that we'd continue to work on is around how we leverage our garages to support electric vehicle charging, overnight uses, et cetera. And so it's a big continuance of that, but also just reevaluating, especially, I mean, state law around removing parking minimums isn't applicable given our current state of transit and our community, but as things like that happen, how can we make sure that we are orienting our parking policy to be aligned with our community's visions and values while also reducing VMT? So it's really, it's a placeholder to have those policy conversations. You're welcome.
With that, any others? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
So I guess first I want to start with a comment. I know in past years I've asked about offsets for affordable housing, and at least in my professional life, I've started to see some of those come online and through CCC. So just thank you guys for all of your effort there, and it makes it a lot easier for our projects here to stay competitive while also meeting these really important climate goals. So first, I wanted to say thank you for that. And then second, I just had a question. You mentioned earlier the city offering assistance to low-income households in order to do home improvements. And at least my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, is that most of those are rebate-based. So is there any thought being put into maybe having some kind of revolving fund that would help offset on the front end and then kind of keep going?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I first just want on the plug for the Central Coast Community Energy new electric building program. So that supports rebates for all electric new affordable housing units, but they've recently expanded that to include accessory dwelling units. So just wanted to share that with commissioners as folks are thinking about adding a unit to their home, that there's several $1,000s available for their buildings. The second question. Right, thank you. Right, so this also in the plan has pretty broad language because one of the things we don't know yet is as the Inflation Reduction Act gets administered through various federal and state agencies, we're gonna know a lot more in the next 2 to 10 months. So we'll finally have Treasury guidance on how the tax rebates will occur in 23 coming up here. And so that will allow us to be smarter and better at how this will work in a way that reflects people's access to things like cash on hand. Similarly, the rebate component will actually be administered through the state of, through states, so through the state of California, and we're, through our professional organizations, right now in engagement with the California Energy Commission and a couple of other state agencies and really advocating for ways that those programs can be equitably administered so that the folks that it's meant to actually support will actually be able to access it.
Great. Thank you, and feel your pain on waiting for Treasury direction on some of the new laws that came out. Thank you.
If I may, I'll just add, when we set out to think about this task, we've had a lot of conversations in part through a 6-series Green and Healthy Roundtables, technical expert sort of stakeholder workshop. We had 6 of those meetings, but one of the things that really came out of that is that there's a whole suite of different funding things that are out there right now. There's rebates, there's tax credits, there's upfront cash, there's things that you can do. And so one of the things that sort of came out of that process is realizing we barely understand how to navigate if you're gonna layer and stack 4 or 5 different rebates and try and go out and spec the right thing and find a contractor to install it and get it building permitted. We as professionals can barely understand that pathway. So how can anybody who has a busy life, who's not a professional doing this type of work, possibly figure that all out? So we thought one of the ways we could really add and accrue value would be to help connect people with all those things and make that sort of a almost like a concierge service, I guess.
City Angie's List. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before we conclude this item, should we check for public comment?
Yes, thank you, Marquis. I can confirm I haven't received any requests to comment on this item.
that, the next item, Tyler Corey is going to talk about the 23-25 Planning Commission goal setting and financial plan process. Corey?
All right, thank you, Chair Khan. I'm going to kick this off, and Tyler's going to bring up an illustrative slide, but I'll just start by talking about last night at the City Council. I want you all to be aware that last night, setting the stage and the strategic scan were presented to the City Council, that the video from that meeting is available online now. So anybody who wants to either read the agenda report or watch the video and get an understanding, really level setting of where the city is at relative to all the initiatives that we're pursuing, our financial status, and our progress on the current major city goals. It's a great presentation and discussion that the City Council had. And so on this slide, it kind of highlights the whole budget process for you. It's a funnel process where right now we're at the very open end of the funnel, setting the stage, and then moving into more and more detail until we're ready to recommend adoption of a financial plan in June 2023. On the right-hand side of this graphic, you see so many opportunities for public engagement, and this is an important part of being an advisory body as well, is that the City Council has selected you for this role and is also very interested in, what your input is in terms of the goals for our next financial plan and the things that we should be focused on. So I've been able to give this presentation to the Cultural Heritage Committee, Architecture Review Commission, and now the Planning Commission. So we have a 2-year financial plan in the city of San Luis Obispo, and we adopt annual budgets. But the 2-year financial plan basically establishes those major city goals and the department work programs, and they stay the same for the most part for the 2-year cycle. So some of the things that are coming before the City Council in preparation for making decisions on the next 2-year financial plan, like we heard just now about the climate action plan, that'll be going to the City Council, the update on that. There's a homelessness response plan. We're updating our public engagement and noticing manual to do a better job at doing outreach for diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's that urban forest plan, a downtown parking and access plan. The Planning Commission has already reviewed and recommended, or will be in December, the climate adaptability and safety element. You've had a study session, but that's going to be in front of you for a recommendation to the City Council. I mentioned our AB 1600 fee update, which the RFP will be in front of the City Council in 2023. And then we've just actually executed a contract to award that transit innovation study, so that's kicking off. So these are all things that are happening, some in service to current major city goals, but also some that are presented to the City Council as study sessions so that they can make decisions for the next financial plan about where city resources should be allocated. And so what Tyler's going to do is lead you through the process of what the Planning Commission's input to the City Council will be with respect to major city goals and the Community Development Department work program as well. And just before I turn it over to Tyler, I did, think it would be helpful maybe to highlight a couple of key projects that we're aware of. One from the general plan land use element, which is that Upper Monterey area plan. So of all the different projects identified in the land use element, the special focus areas in Chapter 8, one of the most significant and longstanding programs that we haven't received funding for or been able to implement is that Upper Monterey area plan. So that would be one that, as your community development director, I would recommend. I think it makes, I think it's an appropriate recommendation for going forward. The other that I'll recommend is, it's not currently in the general plan, but, we've recently had a major change, last year, a major change to the airport land use plan. And what that's done is changed the standards that apply to development in the southern part of the city of SLO that's influenced by airport aircraft overflight. And so one of the things that we know about that area is it's covered by specific plans, and the specifically want to reference the Margarita area specific plan because that's an area that has not developed at the same pace as the Orchid area or airport area specific plans. San Luis Ranch, Avila Ranch, all those projects are taking off. Things have stalled somewhat in the Margarita area specific plan, but now with the change to the airport land use plan, that really creates a unique opportunity for us to revisit the development potential that exists for all those undeveloped properties in the Margarita area to address both housing goals as well as just our goals for urban form. Like, we want to be a compact urban area where we build up and not out, as was mentioned by a speaker earlier today. And there's an opportunity to do that in the Margarita area on the David Garcia Ranch on the sort of eastern portion of the Margarita area, and also accomplish a really important infrastructure connection, which is that Prado Road connection all the way through from South Higuera Street to Broad Street. So right now it just sort of, it dead ends at a private property that's a ranch, and people live on that ranch, and it's a wonderful space. We have the opportunity, I think, to make some changes that will facilitate the long-term development of that part of the city, and I would suggest that could be another potential goal that you forward that would become part of our department's work program for the next financial plan. So those are just two seeds and two thoughts for you, and then I'll turn it over to Tyler to lead you through the rest of the discussion.
Great, thanks for that overview, Michael, super helpful. The staff report that was attached to the agenda packet kind of provides some of the background context, the goals that we had established in the last financial plan, and kind of the strategy to review those and make any changes or just completely update new goals into the work plan. So I think what I'm going to do, I don't really have a longer presentation. I just wanted to review the goals from last year, and this is housing was one of the goals, and it was to increase affordable and workforce housing supply. We also had a goal that was sustainability, to reduce the GHG emissions and reduce VMT. And then our third goal was multimodal circulation, and this was to improve walkability and transit. So those are the three that the Planning Commission had in the last financial plan. We had these, I think we had 4 in the 1921 plan. One of them was removed because it was complete. These 3 kind of moved forward, but language was updated. So it's kind of a question for really the commission, kind of starting with the priorities that we currently have, which housing and homelessness is a major city goal. Maybe we look at number 1 here and take a second to read through that and discuss whether we need to make any updates to that. And I'm happy to answer any questions on what's been accomplished and where we're headed with some of the action items in the current major city goal.
Commissioner Francis.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of start the discussion around this number 1 here. My initial thoughts when I was reading through it was, do we still want to focus on the ADU as kind of that primary first line thing there, or do we want to kind of switch around the emphasis a bit? Some of the things I just had questions about is, do we want to make sure that it does say workforce and missing middle housing, but do we want to be specific there in focusing on multifamily and infill opportunities, particularly with the comment earlier about how we could potentially be focusing on the Upper Monterey plan and the Margarita area plan. This could be a place for us to kind of plop those in there as very specific goals, because this is very broad right now, although the ADU thing is pretty specific, but just putting that out there as a general starting point for us.
Commissioner Hopkins.
I would be fully supportive of kind of that switching around. I feel like, and maybe Tyler, you can update us, there's been really good progress on the ADUs specifically. And I like that emphasis on, trying to maybe maximize density and height opportunities when feasible. So we can stay in compliance with state law, and also just to meet good, housing, equity, and economic goals. So I'd be fully supportive of including those as well.
Any other comments?
Just a question, a clarification on Commissioner Francis's suggestion. Were you suggesting eliminating the ADU or just adding additional points of emphasis to it? And I guess also my question for staff would just be, if we just have kind of a staff update on how they think progress on ADUs are going.
I would say it might just be incidental, but reading through it the first couple of times, it just struck me as it felt like that was our number one priority. And just based on anecdotal conversations, it sounds like there's been a lot of movement on ADU development. I'm not suggesting we necessarily take it out, because that still is an important piece of the puzzle, but maybe putting something else as the primary position there.
Just to discuss that just for a moment on ADUs, there's been a tremendous amount of progress that we've had, not only just with updates to make our ordinance consistent with all the changes we see every year with state law, but just our fee schedule associated with ADUs and everything else we have that promotes that. We also get credit for half of the units, ADUs that are constructed. We get half of those as credited towards low income, towards meeting our RHNA requirements. So it is an important goal for us. It is a key tool for us to make progress on that low income RHNA. And so I do think that keeping it as a focal point, maybe, agree, maybe it doesn't need to be the lead-in sentence, but somewhere in this would still be helpful.
So again, that is helpful, thank you. But this is not, and forgive me, I'm new to this process, this is not something where we would consider the ADUs to be a complete goal or something like that, right? You wouldn't say that you're where you want to be, it's still in progress?
I mean, you could have, again, it's the commission's purview, they could make ADUs its own goal if you wanted it to, but I think it does fall under this larger umbrella of affordability and workforce housing supply. So I think it is a kind of a bullet point or a kind of a sub-item in there.
And we're building about 75 ADUs a year, so we're making pretty good progress on that front. And as Tyler mentioned, the permit process is really dialed in, and we're consistent with state law. So I expect that to continue.
That context is helpful, thank you.
Commissioner Houghton?
There we go. Following up on it, thanks for saying that, Commissioner Francis, because I didn't really pick up on that, but you're right. It's right there as the first thing, like maybe it's the most important thing. So, and the words density and infill might make sense to include in there somehow. And then did I hear mention of dealing with homelessness as part of this number one housing goal? Is that the idea? Because that word's not in there, I don't think.
It could be, right now we have housing and homelessness as a major city goal, so it could be added to the opening statement.
Okay, and I was gonna ask, how many ADUs are we getting now? 75 per year, is that it? That's pretty good. Tyler, we spoke on the phone today or yesterday about various projects, and I asked the question, how many affordable housing units do we have in the city? And it seemed like it wasn't that easy of a question to answer.
We have the number, I just don't have it memorized.
Well, I'm kind of curious, are we like halfway to our goal? Are we a quarter of the way? Are we almost there? I don't think we're almost there.
Are you talking about the RHNA progress, or are you talking about just in general, how many affordable units?
Well, whatever number we're shooting for and whatever number we have, what do those look like? And that doesn't necessarily go into this. It's just kind of a question that's coming up for me in talking about this.
Sure, so just big picture, we had about 3,300 units in our RHNA for this 8-year planning period that we're in right now for our housing element.
What's RHNA?
Regional Housing Needs Allocation.
Thank you.
So that's the state kind of requirement we have for production or goal. And it's broken out by income levels, so above moderate, low, very low, extremely low. And we've, out of all those numbers, I believe we had about 1,400 units that were above moderate. We've met that already, so we don't get any more credit for above moderate units going forward over the next 6 years. I want to say we had a goal of a remainder goal that I think Kyle had a slide up that had about 400 units or so in the low income category that we were still working towards. The project that you reviewed earlier tonight was going to produce about 100 or so of that. So big big jump towards accomplishing that. But we still have, I would say, close to, 1,000 units that we need to produce in the moderate and below income categories to meet that goal from the state.
So I guess my next question on that is, those units are gonna come from things like this project we just saw tonight. It's gonna come from affordable requirements for new developments and things like the Link that are mostly market-based. And is there anything that we wanna think about in terms of setting the goal, like where those units are? Do we wanna emphasize from the market or from the nonprofit sector, or is there any reason to try to emphasize one part of that or the other, or just we'll take it wherever it comes from?
I think we will take it wherever we can get it.
Okay.
Is the answer.
But I
Okay.
want to add a little bit of background to that, which is another recent accomplishment for our department is an update of our inclusionary housing ordinance, accomplishment for the city. And that substantially increased the requirements for market rate mixed income projects to provide affordable housing, to pay fees in lieu of providing affordable housing. But there was recognition in the council's adoption of that updated ordinance, there was recognition that more needs to be done to meet the RHNA targets, to meet, moderate income, for whatever reason, is been very difficult to get production on. Our affordable housing developers are getting tax credits and other benefits for providing low income and very low income units, and we're doing pretty good in those areas, but not as well in moderate, not as well maybe in the very low and extremely low. And so
Is that the
we've
missing
already-
middle that we're talking about, the moderate?
Moderate is 80 to 120% of area median income in terms of
Isn't
rents
that
and sales.
what you
Sorry.
said that we have plenty of?
No, above moderate, yeah.
So, yeah, just for, I guess maybe just for full clarity, the word missing middle is not an income category. It's an architectural design theme. So it's looking at additional density on like single-family lots and integrating duplexes, triplexes, quads, in R1 neighborhoods. And right now, we're looking into a missing middle program along some of our higher transportation corridors that are right now zoned R1. And so what does that look like? We're focusing on that in the next financial plan. We had it as a work program in this current financial plan, but other priorities kind of emerged, and so we've been focused on that. But this is still a priority, and it's something we're continuing to work on and hope to accomplish in the next financial plan.
Okay.
So one of the things we do have direction from the city council already to pursue, but would be, great reinforcement from the planning commission is to identify other funding sources to promote even more affordable housing than our own ordinances or standards or affordable housing developers will create. So that there needs to be some added, some extra ingredient into the mix here in order for us to accomplish, our regional housing need allocation, to accomplish those larger affordable housing goals. And, we're constantly looking for grants and those kinds of things, but just having that be formal direction from the city council to continue to pursue as part of a goal is helpful.
Well, thanks for all that. Are we trying to provide language, specific language that will go into this thing? Is that our objective here tonight? Like new
Either way,
sentences?
it would be helpful to have specific language, but you could also, give us general language and we could come back in December and share.
No, we can't come back in December. It's due on the 9th. So, I guess we could ask for some leeway there.
Just depends on how far you get.
Yeah.
And how much energy you have.
So we can't just
Or
give
you can trust us to
You could give
vague statements.
You could give us specific language. You could give us maybe some general language, and we can work on that.
Okay.
And obviously, we have access to the audio here, and so we can go back and listen to what was said.
Okay. Are you getting the kind of direction that you need out of the things that we're saying?
I think I would like to hear a little bit more about what we want to do with number one. I've heard a lot of different things, which has been helpful, but I'd like to hear maybe a little more concise, some more direction on. I think I heard move the first sentence, further down, I heard the word infill
Infill and density, get that?
and density. So
And,
Street plan and focus on finding additional funding sources.
great.
I don't want to speak for.
go right, no, that sounds great. And a combination of market and nonprofit sector contributions, something like that.
Did we want to include the Margarita area question on reviewing that for additional density opportunities?
Yeah, I'll turn my light off.
Commissioner Munoz Morris?
Thank you. I have a couple different thoughts I was going to share, kind of unrelated, but I think to whether making specific call-outs for Margarita area, I think if we're going to include language about infill, that might kind of address it, and we're not specifically calling out pockets of city, and we're just kind of generally talking about infill. So I personally would feel comfortable just including a more general statement of that sort, and I'm in agreement with the comments that I've heard so far. Again, being kind of new to this myself as well, I have a couple of thoughts that I want to share with you, and I don't know if this bullet point number 1 is the perfect landing spot for them or not, but it's just something that's in my mind as I consider this. First one is around open space with new developments. And I mean, we can talk about affordability and density. We can just, max out a lot, right? And not have parks or open spaces or anything like that. So I don't know if we want to include some language or something about ensuring that, we're keeping that in mind with this effort. And that affordable projects should also include, obviously, these open public spaces, et cetera. Again, I don't know if it's a natural landing place for this, or if this is something we want to consider separately as its own bullet point. But I just wanted to kind of throw it out, and I'll be happy to hear your thoughts in a second. The second one was about around something that I was lucky enough to kind of work on a couple years ago somewhere else, which is, I think the World Health Organization provides an age-friendly designation for cities that incorporate certain standards for ensuring kind of the safety of all citizens so that people can kind of age in place gracefully and, safely, et cetera. And I was wondering if maybe this would be a good place to include some sort of language around that, or, aiming to achieve some of those standards so that, as our community ages, they don't necessarily feel like they have to go elsewhere to feel safe in their surroundings, and that new design standards include, kind of just more, some of those guidelines, I guess. So just two thoughts that came to mind, and just wanted to put them out there for discussion.
Hopkins?
Thank you. So I guess maybe to move things along a little, just to make sure we can at least get past this first bullet point. Maybe we kind of synthesize some of these things, just maybe get nods. So accessory units would go further down. We'd move up, continue to emphasize affordable housing. That'd be on top, starting there. So reordering the sentences, adding a sentence, maybe saying, encouraging, we talked about height, density, infill. I think maybe I'd like to hear from staff if mention of specific plan development would be helpful in this sense, because all those things, while included, are kind of separate from the specific task of a specific plan development. So would you find that helpful to have included in there? Okay, because I think
it would be helpful, because it is, once we get into, drilling into the actual work program, to have that language there and just for council to see that will be helpful for us to kind of make that transition and put it in our work plan.
Okay, and then I guess the follow-up question is, I'm going to be saying specific too many times, is it more helpful to specify the specific plans you want to work on, or is there other ones that also might be worth exploring? So keeping it general to, revisiting and developing, amending specific plans.
Well, I think it's helpful in this case to be more specific. Just because the Margarita area specific plan. Specifically has had less development recently, and there's this confluence of both the housing production potential and infrastructure delivery that are, and its location is pretty central and critical to
Could we just,
mobility.
could we perhaps put the Margarita specific plan in the multimodal area, just partly because that's one of the linchpins, I think, that you're talking about. Better
Yeah.
circulation for sure, and
Whatever the
more
commission
options,
thinks.
and then put the upper Monterey right in the middle of the housing, because it has so many possible solutions for us. A good plan should stimulate a lot more housing. Just as a thought, just spread them out a little bit.
I guess I would prefer to see it in housing because I think the opportunity could be in housing with the subsequent benefit being circulation. And I see the primary objective there being housing. I mean, I'm open to other thoughts, but I guess I just see it more there as a leading goal. Personally, I mean, I'm just saying, but okay, so I think that would be my suggestion, would be to specifically add the specific plan there. And then I just wanted to address the comments on open space. I would argue that the emphasis of affordable housing programs has that built in. There's a lot of requirements for open space on affordable housing that are impossible to get around. They're state mandated. So there's going to be open space in affordable housing developments, and then there's also subsequent requirements for affordable housing to be located in proximity to parks as well. So it's kind of two birds, one stone, both off-site and on-site open space. So I feel that that's built in appropriately there, but open to fellow commissioners' thoughts on that topic as well.
Let's see, Commissioner Francis.
I thought you did a good job summarizing that. And I just had a quick question about if we put both of those area-specific plans in there, is that detrimental or is that actually helpful? Or should we focus on one, right? Should it be that we just want to see Margarita or we just want to see Monterey?
I think it's helpful to have both. I mean,
Okay.
if you listed like 10 of them, I would say we need to pare it down, but 2 is not overbearing.
And then we could potentially mention them in housing and then circle back around to, in the third goal there, was that connectivity, bringing up that we want to make sure that the area-specific plans are a focus of that connectivity corridor, something like that.
I think if you wanted to break them up, I would think that the Margarita area specific plan update is, I agree that that's housing centric. Upper Monterey, I think, if you wanted to mention that under number 3, that actually makes a lot of sense.
I would actually agree with that specifically because since I read the land use plan that was sent to me specifically, sorry. And that's the challenge to see how many times we can say it, right? There is a call out there for a new transportation center to come into that area, right? So I think it would fit very nicely in line with bullet point 3. So just a thought.
And just to finish the thought on your open space, I like that you brought up that it's already embedded in a lot of the housing, but I actually don't want to drop it entirely and kind of look at open space more broadly for number 2, maybe just re-emphasizing, a focus on our open space corridor in number 2 there. And I also really liked your mention of the language about kind of aging in place, and I'm not sure exactly the nature of it, but just recognizing that this is a community that people come to, that we want to make it someplace that they spend their entire lives. I liked that, and especially thinking about that in terms of long-term planning.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yeah, just following on that, I had a couple things, but following right on that, I think you talked about aging in place, but also sort of design standards for older people. I don't know who they're talking about, but and maybe that fits with the Margarita specific plan in some ways, because I know we had all hoped and there is some senior housing, I forget whether it's the memory units and a couple of things in the kind of Tank Farm, Broad Street in that corridor, but really not as much even now, I think, I think the city needs. So it could well be that the Margarita area plan could give more attention to elderly populations or whatever, and encourage that, frankly, if there's better circulation to go with it, that we make the connections to Broad Street and all that. I don't know, it's just a thought to get it all in. Also, I thought with the sustainability one, could we just have something, maybe just a phrase like expanding the urban forest? It sounds like they're very interested in there. And then it's my interest in giving the tree committee a boost to kind of extract more trees when we get new things going or something like that. And then lastly, I'm still wondering if maybe in the multimodal circulation goal, maybe we could just have a clause studying the viability of a transit fee for new housing units. I still feel like I'd like to keep pushing on, I think we got to get more money for transit somehow and get more people going. And it's that, I just want to keep pushing on it. I think if people paid a fee, they might ride it. Who knows? It's happened before. Pardon me? I'll get that in there. Otherwise, I know it has to be there. Yes, specific fee. But that was just a thought. I'm out of here.
Commissioner Houghton?
Thanks. I have a larger question, which I canceled my button because I think it's something I'd better ask, like with some of you guys offline, like what is a specific plan and what does that enable us to do? And does it include changing density or zoning, stuff like that? So, and there's a lot of talk about Margarita. I have it up on Google Earth here, but are you talking about okay, I'll stop back from that. I have a particular word to add or to suggest to number 2, which would be to get the word electrification in that first number 1. So number 2, sustainability, and then implement the common action plan with emphasis on 1, identify, implement, and promote financial incentives to improve energy efficiency and encourage electrification in pre-1990 housing stock. So that's my particular suggestion.
Commissioner Francis?
Cancel that.
Okay. Commissioner Cooley?
Just wanted to, and I'm hoping not to make staff's head explode here. It seems like we're trying to stuff a lot of ideas into these 3 categories because we're reluctant to change the categories. I guess I'm just looking for some guidance here from staff about, do you find that we are making these categories harder to understand by trying to put too much in them? Would we be better served by breaking things out into additional, like a number 4, for instance? Or do you find this structure useful and actionable?
I mean, I'm following along. So I think it makes sense to me. I think that the number 1, for instance, housing needs some updates to it, and just to reflect kind of where we're at today with some of the work programs and where we want to go in the next financial plan. So I think I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing there. Number 2, it doesn't need to be set up like this, but I want you to, think about how that is laid out, and are all these, 3 bullet points, for instance, are all of those top priorities still, or do we want to remove one or add one or completely change the language there, or completely change the title, right? I mean, all this is on the table, and if there's a new idea or a new goal that the commission, comes up with, we can always add another goal.
Well, then I guess my question to the rest of the commission would be, and this can be nods or thumbs up, but is everyone happy with these 3 broad categories? And if so, are we happy, I guess, tinkering and adding things to these categories, or does anyone feel the need for a new category? I'm talking about the big 1, 2, 3. I'm just trying to move it along a little bit, and I thought that maybe if we could get agreement on the three broader categories, then we could get more specific.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, I'm in alignment with this, but if anything, I think at least I continue talking about open space parks, and we talked about the urban forest. So if anything, that could potentially become a fourth bullet point, to just really focus in on our tree canopy, our open spaces, our parks, et cetera. I don't know that it needs to be though, but if anything, that's where my mind went initially.
I think under number 2, I think the kind of the open space and I think the urban forest would fit well, kind of together under number 2. So that could either replace one of the 3, or it could add on to one, or it could be a number 4.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to wrap my head around all these, but I think at number 4 on that open space and forest and might be a good idea, trees. I think I would agree with that. And then, just bigger picture, number 2 just seems too long and rambling. It's just, I don't know, it's not, but that's just me. Commissioner Houghton?
Well, I'm thinking about this open space, parks, and a possibility of a number 4. Could we maybe create one that's called livability? And that would encompass things like open space, access. You could even throw DI. You could even have something about the economy in there if you wanted to. I mean, this is kind of big strokes here, but it's getting late, but.
The age-friendly city as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're already the happiest place. Why not make it livable too?
That's Disneyland.
The livablest?
The livablest.
Yeah, but I agree that I think adding that number 4 actually kind of clears up the first 3 as well, because it prevents us from jamming all these other things into 1, 2, 3.
And then if you want number 2 to be a little bit more direct, I would focus on the first item there, because we've just adopted an all-electric new building ordinance. And as Chris mentioned, there's a lot of money coming towards fuel switching and electrification. And so programmatically, we've already laid the groundwork. And if that ends up being a goal, I think there are a lot of resources to accomplish a lot. So I know we're prioritizing low and moderate income households with the funding that'll be available for that type of fuel switching. We're also looking to do education outreach for contractors engaging in these projects, as well as residents, to make them aware of what's available and how easy it is to get a permit and get it done. And so if number 2 focused on that, then and you agree, it seems like that a number 4 would be helpful. Then number 4 could be the place where we talk about expanding the urban forest and hit on livability.
I certainly like the livability on number 4. Hey, I have a specific question that I heard tonight and I wanted clarification on, if you don't mind. It's Prado. I thought Prado was supposed to do a little horseshoe and come down and hit where Santa Fe is going to merge in the future, and that would be where it ends. But I heard that it was going to go to Broad Street earlier tonight. Is that?
Yeah, so North Santa Fe will intersect with the future Prado Road extension.
Okay.
But then Prado Road will continue, and there'll be a T intersection at Broad Street, north of the Damon Garcia Sports Fields.
Oh.
Prado Road will actually align with the driveway of the Broad Street mixed-use project, where the Wild Horse Coffee is.
Because at one point it was going to line up with industrial.
At one point.
Yeah.
And that got changed.
Yeah, I knew that. Okay, well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that, because I always thought Prado should intersect with Broad.
Yeah.
So that's good. Thank you. So where are we on this subject? I think we made some good headway. I think we're all getting tired. We ought to try to wrap it up.
I think we're really good on 1 through 3, and number 4, Only thing I think that we have so far is about expanding the urban forest and then the concept of livability, but I'm trying to connect that to, general plan programs or something that is legitimate for our work program for the next 2 years and a priority for our work program for the next 2 years. And if there isn't something that immediately comes to mind, then that's instructive too.
Oh, I just wanted to also say, I think livability can often be construed a certain way that would actually has a potential to undermine our first goal, depending on how it's interpreted. And so I guess I kind of like organizing it the way it is, where we build in some of these goals into some of the existing ones. I think creating that fourth one could actually potentially do disservice to our first goal and a major city goal. So that would be my recommendation, is just the livability I think we all know how we mean it here when we say it, but I think it can be misconstrued. And when seen against each other, create a little bit more confusion or muddy the waters a bit.
Go ahead.
So I'm just reading number 3 here. One thing I was just thinking about, it would be nice if each of our categories was like a broader thing, like the first one's housing, the second one is, climate change or reducing greenhouse gases, the third one is circulation, and the fourth one is livability or some other title. But so I'm getting broad titles that then have what do we mean by each of those titles. So, Commissioner Francis.
Not to be the bike weirdo, but I would really like to see the number 3 with some specific language on most of the projects we've been seeing coming through. We've seen improvements that have led to protected bike lanes, and I want to maybe have some specific language about encouraging protected bike lanes in all new development that goes in, so that we can really improve that circulation.
I'm so glad you said that. I heard somebody earlier say Portland is the bicycle mecca. I was like, you've clearly not been to the Netherlands where they take that very seriously. And I would love to see protected bike lanes kind of prioritized a lot more and just true multimodal.
A question to staff, don't the circulation element kind of lay out a pattern of where we want protected bike lanes and that stuff?
It's the active transportation plan.
Yeah, the active transportation plan.
Is it bad to also mention it here, or
No.
is it, or maybe
But-
irrelevant to mention it here?
No,
Or-
it's, if the planning commission forwards a goal that talks about protected bike lanes, what staff does then is look to the active transportation plan for the programs to implement, so that if the council ends up, wanting that language, protected bike lanes in one of its major city goals, we build the work program around that and we'll draw tasks from our adopted plans, and it'll be, okay, that'll be the focus for the next 2 years.
Commissioner Houghton?
So when I said the livability thing, my idea was that it would be its own number 4 after housing, sustainability, multimodal, and it could pull from some of these other ones to make them more svelte, if you will. So like the project design promotes accessible, convenient, safe, pedestrian, this is in the middle, number 2 of number 2. A bunch of that could go into livability. And then the open space, urban forest, and whatever other things we could throw in there. And definitely thumbs up on the bike from a fellow bike weirdo over here. And then one other minor thing in number 2, the electrification and energy efficiency. Why pre-1990, and can we just say in existing housing stock?
Yeah, you can change that.
Go ahead. We want to give Corey a chance to take everything that we speeded him over the last half an hour and digest them and send them out to us or something? Or do we want to just try to approve, have him type them in right now and that's what we're going to do? I guess it'd be difficult without another meeting to try to do an email chain that.
The attorney is saying no.
Brown Act perspective, we'll want to avoid
Okay,
doing this via email.
thank you, Counselor.
And all I was going to say was, I think I am in support of adding at number 4, while recognizing I also had the thought that, depending on how you define it, it could be in tension with a lot of the other goals. But I think if we're largely creating that number 4 by pulling items from elsewhere within these goals, I think that's minimized.
And
Just
I
out of,
realize I might be in the minority. Just the term livability and how it's typically used, I just have an aversion to it, but I might be in the minority, so I recognize that if the direction is there. It's a term that's often used to be quality of life type arguments to diminish housing projects coming in. So pushing back on things like height, you hear quality of life, neighborhood character, all those.
So it's like
It's synonymous with those terms. So that's why I particularly have an aversion to it, and I think why I see it being inconsistent next to housing. If the majority agrees otherwise, then it seems like we might go that direction, but I just personally wouldn't be able to support that, but I understand, and I see where you're coming from. I know the intent's good. I'm not trying to argue that, but I that's just the perspective where I think it can muddy the goals here.
Well, if I may then, just in the interest of making your life a little bit easier and acknowledging the fact that what I can see on the screen here, you've kind of incorporated our thoughts rather nicely into these existing bullet points. Could we add a fourth? I mean, we could add a fourth one. I think we could certainly do that and pull from the other ones, but at the end of the day, we're just kind of rearranging language that would already be existing in the ones that we are. And if we're running into concerns of maybe having somewhat improper language to define what we all kind of understand that we're trying to do here, perhaps this format that's in front of us right now might be the most effective way forward in the interest of time and city staff's capacity to do all this stuff and avoiding Brown Act concerns with email threads with a bunch of us on them. So, yeah.
I feel like I'll go ahead and just make a suggestion, something that I haven't seen this body do very often, that some of the other advisory bodies do when they have a complicated subject that requires a little more focus from a couple passionate members. What you guys could do is form a subcommittee to meet, in a non-quorum of your group with city staff to kind of further refine the language, your intention with these. That's something that, based on your guys' calendars, you can get in the books fairly quickly while still adhering to finance's deadline of trying to get these solidified. But that is up to you.
And then alternatively, we can also, we'll produce the minutes and potentially include this language, right, in the minutes. And then if you want to discuss the minutes and do some refinements, even though that'll be December 16th, we'll get the updated language in. That won't be a problem.
If this moves faster, I would just say that I'm fine with it in the 1, 2, 3 format. I think we were just sort of tweaking and optimizing, but I do recognize the concerns.
But I do like the idea of putting in the minutes, and that way we can discuss it at the next meeting. I think that's a great idea. And we can really discuss.
Yeah, I think that's a good recommendation. That way I can get this, I think, in a form that, from what I'm hearing, I got a good sense of what we want to do with it, and then get the deadline met, and then we can always provide an update should you guys have additional.
Just be sure each of the goal has the word specific in it.
And just one final clarification, because it didn't quite make it on the list yet. Was everybody okay with adding some language around protected bike lanes into number 3?
Yes.
I just want to, okay.
Can we also shoehorn the term bike weirdo in there? I really like it. This bike weirdo. We have apparently at least 2 on the dais, so.
So any words that you want to add into 1, 2, 3 that we can build around? Now's the time.
Just add existing.
It'll look better. Cleaned up.
So Commissioner Francis, to your point about protected bike lanes, would bullet point 2, sub point 3 maybe be a good landing place for something like that, to develop standards that support infrastructure improvements for alternative transportation, such as prioritizing protected bike lanes, or something to that tone?
It just felt better in the last one because of the kind of circulation, walkability, and
Yeah,
transit.
perfect.
I think I would put it in all three if we could, but I'm content with where it is, though I do see a reason to potentially move it to number 2.
I didn't realize it's already been, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're good.
Going once? Going twice? I've got all thumbs up?
Do you need a motion for this?
That's
or
it.
is this?
Do we need a motion? No? We got thumbs up. With that, would Deputy Community Development Director Tyler Corey please provide us an update on the agenda forecast?
All right, thank you, Chair Khan, members of the commission. Looking out, next meeting is on December 14th, and so we have the safety element coming before you all before it goes on to the city council, so you guys would be reviewing and making a recommendation on that document. Also, we have the access parking management plan that will be coming before you as well on that night, so a couple good size items to get through. And then we don't have a meeting again until the end of January, and currently I do not have any items yet that are scheduled out that far. So one more meeting for the rest of this year, a couple big items, and that'll be the end of 2022.
Thank you. I think we have a quitter in our midst. Yes.
I was going to say the same thing, that somehow we seem to be losing somebody, but I think we know where to find her.
Ever since I joined,
and,
I feel like it's something I did. We've lost 3 now. What was it? Was it me? Or?
And honestly, I think she's shown us as a person who not only does her homework, but zeroes in and gets clear language and really pushes ahead especially in transportation things so well. Just from scratch, just bang, like that. I like it. We're gonna miss you.
Miss you guys too.
Yeah, I just want to second that too, to say that it's been a pleasure serving with you here, but it'd be sadder if you were just going, but it's great to know that this your level of expertise and review is going where it's going. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it. I miss you all.
We can always come visit.
That's right.
Just one more announcement.
Yes.
For those who don't know, I am expecting a child next month, so I am going out on maternity leave starting next Wednesday and will be out through early May. So legal representation will look a little different over those months. We have a new deputy city attorney starting November 28th, but she'll require some training before she's fully staffing planning commission meetings on her own. So it'll probably be the city attorney here sometimes, and with the deputy shadowing or contract staff helping out. In the next few days, I will send out an email about who you can contact from our office in the event you have questions leading up to a meeting, so that you're not left in the dark. But I wish you all a happy holiday season, and I will see most of you in the spring.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. And we definitely need counsel here because we sometimes get out of here.
We're gonna finish this meeting over some beers.
I'll also just quickly note that I'll have to miss the December 14th meeting for some planned travel, so I just wanted to note that. I'll reach out to city staff when the agenda correspondent comes out as well.
With that, the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for December 14th, as we said earlier, in these council chambers. And the regular meeting of November 23rd has been canceled due to Thanksgiving holidays. With that, I call this meeting adjourned.